Well, good morning and welcome to City Hall. We're going to get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend John J. Alvaro from Spring Creek Baptist Church is going to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Shadid if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But would everyone please stand?
Let's pray. God of all that is, of what we can see and of what's hidden, we give thanks for this day, another day to choose the good, to choose light, and to choose life. Show us the way forward. We ask that you would make the path straight before us and that you would steel our nerves and these servants' nerves for difficult choices. You'd give us kindness for those less fortunate. Help us to see this city, our city, as you see it, and to love one another as you have loved us. Give these servants a balance of justice and of mercy in a culture of cynicism, of arrogant swagger and brutality. Give these men and women your spirit of innocence and curiosity and compassion. Give us all open hearts that we may lead this community from that calm and that quiet center. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a chambers full of people today, but I will draw attention to those at the back. This is Troop 94. And they are working on their merit badge called Citizenship in the Community. You guys wave to the TV cameras from back there. Let's show our appreciation to Troop 94. You think you're on a holiday break and they make you get up and go to City Hall. Life is tough. All right, we're on item 3 of the Office of the Mayor's, an appointment on 3A of Pat Ryan to the Planning Commission. I'll look for a motion.
I'd happily move the item.
Second.
Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 3B, C, and D are opportunities to go into executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss salary evaluations. How about a motion to move those to executive session?
Second.
Okay, we have to do them individually. All right, how about 3B then, a motion and a second? Cast your votes. That item moves to executive session. And how about a motion on 3C? Cast your votes. That item moves to executive session. And how about one on 3D? Cast your votes, and it passes unanimously. Item 4 is the Journal of Council Proceedings. 4A is to receive the journal for December 8th, and 4B is to approve the journal of November 24th. Is there a motion? All right, comments or questions on the journal? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, just one this morning. It's on page 23. It's under claims for denial. Item Q9, Q1J, Thomas Webb. We ask that to be deferred 3 weeks until January 12th of 16.
Any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, we'll move on to item 6, which is revocable permits, and New Year's Eve is around the corner. Is anyone here representing opening night? Yeah, Peter, come on up. Caitlin Carter and Peter DeLisi are here to tell us about opening night once again, our celebration of New Year's Eve. Peter, good morning.
Well, good morning. How are you all doing?
Good.
It's wonderful to be here to tell you a little bit about opening night, and I can't believe New Year's Eve is just around the corner once again. I wanted to just say a big thank you to the council and, of course, the city manager and everyone on staff that helps us so much with this event. There's a lot of work that goes into putting on a fireworks display in the middle of downtown Oklahoma City, and closing all the streets for the Finale 5K and the run that we do, and coordinating with all the buildings. And it's we just couldn't do it without all the hard work of the city people that work with us, traffic and transportation, the police department, the fire department. Many different groups work together to help us make this event a success, and we really, really appreciate it. Wanted you all to meet Caitlin Carter. She's the opening night director, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the event.
Okay.
Well, this year we've made some big changes. We've condensed the event quite a bit, so we only have 4 venues, one of which is actually going to be City Hall. Right up here, we're going to have, in the chambers, we're going to have Edgar Cruz. So that's going to be a good time. We've also got the library, the downtown library, the Oklahoma City Museum of Art, the Civic Center, and then, of course, Bicentennial Park, which is where our finale will be. We're also doing our Finale 5K again this year, which is going to start here on Colcord and then make its way down to the Skydance Bridge and back again. So we're excited to have that back. And, yeah, I just want to echo Peter's sentiments and thank all of you so much for everything that you do to help us make this event a success.
All right, City Hall, Library, Museum of Art, and the Civic Center. 4 venues.
Yes.
What time should people start showing up on New Year's Eve?
Well, the venues kick off at 7, so we're going to have, that's when the performances will start in each of the venues. We'll have food trucks that are going to be on Colcord as well that'll be showing up at 5:30, so if people want to kind of get here early and maybe get their dinners in, they can definitely do that. And then for the 5K, that actually starts at 4, so I think registration opens at 3.
All right, food trucks start at 7. People should come on down. And I'm really proud that we have such a family-friendly event for New Year's Eve. It really is a citizen-wide, citywide celebration. Fireworks, if you can stay up till midnight and brave what temperatures they might be. Is it too early to know what the weather's going to be? Do you have any advanced forecast?
I'm hopeful that it's going to be kind of similar to what it's been recently.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks and good luck. And I know you're going to have big crowds again this year.
Thank you very much.
You bet. How about a motion to grant the revocable right-of-way permit to hold opening night? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, and Craig Freeman's going to lead us on a financial report. Craig?
Mayor, as Craig's coming up, Craig will be touching on the audits of a number of entities that we have this morning. There's several on the agenda. And Councilman Greenwell's delayed this morning. I'm a little disappointed Councilman Greenwell's not here this morning because he enjoys this a lot. So.
This is his favorite day. Thank you very much. We will be presenting, and I'll be talking about several of the, 3 of the trusts where the City Council sits at the board of those trusts, just hitting highlights on those financial statements, and then talking about the city's comprehensive annual financial report, which encompasses not only the city, but all of the trusts related to the city into that financial statement. I did want to first, I asked our accounting staff to come today. Accountants usually sit in the background, and they're unrecognized a lot of times for the work that they do. I asked them to come today to take them out of their comfort zone, and so if they would stand, please, our accounting staff. They're embarrassed by this, but I just wanted to recognize them and all the good work that they do for us. Thank you. Also wanted to recognize BKD, our external auditors. They work with us on conducting the audit from outside of the organization to help to hold us accountable, to work hard with us. Our accountants put in many long hours along with our auditors, working evenings and weekends trying to get this completed, and I really appreciate the effort from our accounting staff and from our external auditors. Chad Moore is our engagement partner on that and really has been a partner for the city, and I just appreciate their work. We do have, basically the accounting staff prepares not only our comprehensive annual financial report, but also 15 different trust statements. And as I said before, we'll look at 3 today. But we do have unmodified opinions, basically a clean audit on all of those financial statements, and that's something to be proud of. We did have 3 different findings on the audit. Those can be found in the back of the A133 audit, which is the grant audit, and you have that in your packet. And there's 2 of those in the A133. One of those is in the back of the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority financial reports. We have reviewed those with the mayor and with the audit committee. And so if you have any questions on those as you look at that, we'll be glad to address those. All of those have been addressed and recorded, reflected correctly within the financial statements. One of the things I'm going to focus on as we look at the financial reports is net position. Basically, that looks at the total amount of resources available, assets or resources available to the city, less the amount of obligations and liabilities against the city. And so we'll focus on that primarily as we look at these financial statements. In the MFA, that's primarily the two of the largest funds that we have in the MFA are the Health Insurance Fund and the Workers' Comp Fund. It also funds other services like our Nuisance Abatement Program. It has our advanced architectural and engineering services for the bond program. We also fund IT projects out of there because we have multi-year contracts and also some of our purchases on our IT systems. The net position in the MFA is $39.7 million. It's a decrease of $3.7 million for this year. The decrease is due in part to depreciation of capital assets, just normal depreciation of capital assets, but also a difference in our health insurance program where in this past year the contributions for health insurance or the expenditures for health insurance costs exceeded the contributions. From year to year, it'll go different directions. Generally, what we've seen is that the revenues exceed the expenditures. We've built up a good reserve in that fund. We did also this past year start the funding for the Oklahoma City Health Clinic, and so that's incorporated into that. But those two contributed to the decline in net position, but it's still a positive net position. Moving to the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, the two largest funds in there are dealing with golf courses, the management of our golf system, as well as the fairgrounds, where we fund some of the improvements at the fairgrounds that are funded through bonds supported by the hotel motel tax that's dedicated to the fairgrounds. In that fund, or in that trust, we have a net position of $87.8 million, and it's a decrease of $7.6 million. The majority of the decrease that we saw this past year relates to depreciation on some of the capital assets at the Chesapeake Arena as well as the fairgrounds. Also, we had $1.7 million in expenses in the fairgrounds where we were just doing repairs on facilities. So you have an expenditure, but you don't have an asset in return. It just takes care of the existing asset. So those contributed to that. While we do have a positive net position overall, we have a couple of our funds, the individual funds, that do have a negative net position. The golf courses is one of those that has a negative net position. It's in part due to the outstanding debt that we have on the golf courses, aging facilities that we have at the golf courses that we all know is a challenge, as well as a tight operating position. That's not uncommon within golf courses around the country to have a tight operating position. Golf rounds have been decreasing around the nation. We have actually seen a little bit of improvement in our golf rounds in the past year, and the Golf Commission is very focused on this. They pay attention to this, and they're working to do all they can to improve activities out there. We also have a liability that's recognized for retiree health insurance that has an effect on the golf system. The other fund that has a negative net position is the Fairgrounds Fund, and that is in part the full fairgrounds operations isn't incorporated in the PPA. The Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, Inc. manages the fairgrounds, and so those operations costs and revenues are on that side, not within the city or any of our trusts. Also, some of the facilities that are constructed with city funds, for instance, the Expo Center that's being constructed right now, will actually be a city asset and not a PPA asset. So not an area of concern in large part, but it is something to be aware that one of the other factors affecting that is the aging facilities at the fairgrounds. So we still, even though we've made a lot of improvements out there, there are some facilities that are aging that require a lot of maintenance, and eventually will have to either have major refurbishment or be replaced. Looking at OC, the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, the net position in the Environmental Assistance Trust improved to $35.3 million. That's an increase of $5.4 million from last year. This is primarily due to revenues exceeding expenditures in the fund. Really, the strong financial position in OC is a result of the efforts of the Utilities Department to manage that fund, to provide for capital reserves for capital projects, to reduce the amount of debt, a very low debt level in OC. Operating reserves, it provides for rate stabilization reserves, as well as reserves for storm debris cleanup like what we're seeing right now. Management has worked very hard to establish a rate structure that will provide for a stable operating position for that trust into the future. Looking at our comprehensive annual financial report for the city overall, which does combine in the 3 trusts that we talked about this morning. The net position for the city is $1.9 billion. This is a decrease of $227 million for last year. So it's a significant decrease from the previous year. It's a strong position still, but it's a significant decrease. The major factor influencing that was a change in financial reporting standards that requires us to recognize the net pension assets and net pension liabilities of our pension system as well as pension systems that we support, which includes the state pension system for police and fire, because our police officers and firefighters in the state of Oklahoma, in uniform, police officers and firefighters are in those pension systems. So recognizing the assets and liabilities, actually this year the employee retirement system is 104% funded, which is very strong. The police pension system...
So that's actually an asset.
And that's actually an asset. That's exactly right. The police pension system actually had an asset this year, a net pension asset. The fire system had a net pension liability, which contributes to that reduction of $227 million in our net position. So without that, we actually would have increased net position. If it wasn't for that change in reporting standards, we would have increased net position this year.
And the change, actually, the police pension and fire pension, you're on the fire pension board, is actually improving, but it's the first year that's been recognized on our books. So
That's
there's nothing
correct.
that's really changed.
So it hasn't changed anything of where those positions,
It's just how
those
it's reflected.
funds are. It's just that it's now reflected in the financial statement. So that's the change in the reporting standard. Another area that I'd like to focus on is fund balance, and our fund balance in our governmental funds for the city is just over $1 billion. This is an increase of $66 million from last year. The majority of that increase is from the MAPS program, the MAPS 3 projects, where we're building up assets so that we can spend those reserves on capital projects. And so it's really not unexpected, but it's a continued improvement. The general fund balance, which is our primary operating fund, and I'll talk about the budgetary basis fund balance, is $75.4 million. It's an increase from last year, which is an improvement and puts us in a very good position going into next year. Remember, you have a financial policy that states that we'll try to keep unbudgeted reserves on a budgetary basis between 8% and 15%. And this left us at the beginning of this year just over that 8 to 15%. So we're in a really strong position to weather the storm and to work through the downturn that we're seeing as a result of lower oil prices and the effect on our local economy and our sales tax. That's a lot of information, and if you look at those financial statements, there's a lot of information in there. If there's something that you look at when you're reviewing those that you have questions on, we'd be glad to sit down with you and visit about any individual item or any questions that you have on those, and be happy to answer any of the questions that you have.
All right,
Thank
Craig,
you.
looks like you're good to go. Thanks very much.
Let me ask one question. It has to do with the fund balance.
Yes.
Going into this year, I mean, we're looking at, first of all, spending money out of it, and secondly, we're looking at a budget that's unlikely to add to it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So this year, it does leave us in a strong position to be able to, and really having our reserves at the level that's recommended is there to help us through difficult situations like this, so that in a year when we have revenues fall or perform more poorly than what we anticipated, that we can draw upon those. It draws down the fund balance a little bit. We don't ever plan on using fund balance for ongoing operations. We'll sometime budget the fund balance like you referred to in this year for one-time capital projects. So we're in a strong position beginning this year. It's really uncertain right now. We're halfway through the year. We've seen revenues down in sales tax, especially sales and use tax, as well as in other areas, multiple other areas. So it's a challenging time for us, and it's just a time that, going into next year, it's going to be difficult to say exactly how much fund balance we'll spend down through this year. But we want to leave that as high as we can to be able to, because we don't know how long this economic downturn will last. And so we want to leave it as high as possible. But I think we're in a good position right now to be able to use some of that fund balance to help us get through this year.
It just seems to me that we ought to think about it, what the trigger would be, at what point that would be not the prudent thing to do in terms of looking forward. I mean, don't misunderstand. I mean, I need the roads, so, I mean,
You're talking about using fund
streets
balance. It's a policy decision. You know, our expectation is right now, and it's preliminary because
no, I understand it's a policy decision, but I'll tell you who makes the policy is the staff makes the policy, and we decide to do it or not. So it seems to me it would be reasonable to ask you at this point, at what point you think that would be something we ought to look at. I don't want to be Pollyanna. I don't want to go out and do $1 million worth of roads in Ward 4 and then 6 months from now be concerned that maybe that wasn't such a wise move.
Right. At this point, the funds have not been transferred into the Capital Improvement Fund where we'll actually do the projects. But assuming with what we're looking at right now in our revenue projections, we would expect to be somewhere around, with the commitment of the fund balance, we would expect to be somewhere around 12 to 13% unbudgeted reserves on a budgetary basis for fund balance at the beginning of next year.
So that's if we use the $8 million for resurfacing and what we expect on a shortfall this year on revenue. And, to put things in perspective for you, we have around a $520 million general fund budget. So 15% of that is $63 million. So it just gives you so if we're using $8 million, that's a little under 2%.
Pete, the way I look at it is what we're really doing is just accelerating some necessary projects. I mean, I think across the wards, all the street projects that were included in the $8 million expenditure are certainly necessary, and by us individually prioritizing those projects within our ward just allows us to address those needs. I mean, it's not like we're just, improving things that could probably go without. Some of the streets in my ward really need that attention.
Well, I don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that any of it doesn't need it. Everybody's ward's the same way. We all need it. I'm just somewhat concerned that we don't have a strategy that says at what point is.
I would say this, Pete, though, that compared to, say, the state's rainy day fund, which is limited to $600 million, compared to, say, North Dakota that maintains a $3 billion rainy day fund. The state should have a long time ago looked at creating reserves that they could use for difficult times like this. I think our reserves that we have fall in between those two extremes, the state being so little set aside and then some of the other states having so much. I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
Craig, using the $8 million, what percentage of our general fund do you believe we'll have in a fund balance?
So after we use that $8 million, again, this is a projection to the end of the year, not knowing where sales tax will be. We've projected we'd be between 12 and 13%.
And
so
what
still
is
be within that range of 8 to 15%.
So the council's policy is to have what?
Between 8 and 15%.
Between 8 and 15, and
yes,
we'll have 12. And so, Pete, you're asking for a trigger. Right. I would say if it got below 8, then we definitely should.
Well, I don't want anybody to think that I don't think that we need to do the streets either. I don't want anybody to think that we're going to follow the state's example of how to manage your finances either. But,
right.
But
so looking at the 8 to 15% is a recommended policy. It's recognized as a best practice.
You would feel like if it hit the 8 or got, say, the 9 or something like that, where we were.
I would be really concerned if we were in the position that we're in right now economically. I would be concerned if we finish this year 8 to 9%, because I don't know what's going to be happening going forward. And the uncertainty, I think, says the more fund balance we preserve, the better position we're in. But I think that policy provides guidance for us.
Well, we raised it to 15 not too long ago.
It's been several years. It wasn't 12, and we raised it. It's been 6, 7, 8 years, I think. Raised
Probably about 5 years ago, I think.
So Zion, that's not too long ago.
Recent. Let me see. I want to put this back into dollars, because we go between percentage and dollars, and I think it's important also to put this in a dollar. So what Craig is saying, that if we use $8 million in fund balance and our projections for our cash position based upon the sales tax revenues we've been seeing and what we project to be at our position on June 30th, we'll have between 12 and 13% fund balance. And then we're going to make some budget cuts next year as we go into it, because we have to have a balanced budget at the beginning of July 1. But to get down to 8%, we would have to use another $20 million more. That would be a significant drop in revenue, more than we're projecting. But that being said, it is an uncertain time, so it is a policy decision as we go forward. We're seeing a decline over last year for some sales tax revenues. Now, we can manage around that, and we're pretty good shape, and it's not, you know, what are we down so far this year, Craig?
On sales tax?
It's about 1%.
Right.
A lot behind last year.
The sales tax is a little over 1% down
from last year. So, you know.
And we projected about 2.5% growth.
Okay, and we get $200 million in sales tax, so 1% is just a couple of $1 million on it. So I just want to have things in perspective so you understand the big pictures we're going forward. And there's not a right or wrong answer on this. It's a policy issue based upon where we're at. I mean, we can tell you where we're at now, but we can't tell you what the sales tax revenues are going to be exactly at this point in time as we go forward. The further we go out and project, the more uncertainty there is.
The projection going forward is based on the experience we've had this fiscal year, not what we projected. Is that right?
That's
Yes,
correct.
That's correct.
I wonder if we could, this is on the consent docket, so I was going to talk about it then, but since the discussion's now, I wonder if the council would entertain continuing the diversion or the usage of the $8 million until after our financial conference on February 6th. And the reason I voted for the $8 million, but I think there's been a material change in conditions, and that is the relatively unprecedented condition in oil. In 2015, most companies were hedged. I mean, they're still selling at $90 a barrel of oil. So really, things are really going to change in 2016. The material change in condition is OPEC and Russia indicating they're not going to pull back. And then, surprisingly, U.S. production not decreasing. So you're not seeing that closing of the gap between supply and demand. We're still putting 1 to 2 million barrels a day into storage. So you have unprecedented amounts of storage. We haven't seen this amount since 1930. It's been 85 years. And so I think that the real change could come in 2016. I think that a lot of companies haven't taken their impairments yet. They haven't decreased the amount of what their assets are valued at. They're still using 2014 numbers because that only comes once a year when you file your 10K in January. So I think in January, first week of February, we would know the financial condition of a lot of these companies. The ones that are most vulnerable, obviously, are the highly leveraged exploration and production companies, which is the target, I think, of this whole overproduction strategy of OPEC and Russia. And so I think we'd have a much better idea of what a lot of which are in Oklahoma City, and you have a lot of small companies in Oklahoma City dealing with highly leveraged E&P companies in Texas. So I think if we could wait until February 6th, have our meeting with Russell Evans, and I think we'd have a much better idea by that time the strength of a lot of these Oklahoma City companies and maybe a better idea of where we're going to be in terms of sales tax. I think the real fall off in sales tax is just now starting. And I think if we've learned anything, it's that with this commodity, nobody can predict with any certainty, but it is that uncertainty that I think would make it fiscally responsible just to wait a little bit, 6 weeks, and see where we're at that time.
And just to continue that discussion, I think your points are well taken. However, given the time it takes to get these projects scheduled and let and started, if we came up, or if it was presented to us in the early part of February that we had additional information that really began to worry us, we could cut that spending at that point in time, just terminate it. We certainly can't spend the full $8 million between now and February, is all I'm trying to say. So, perhaps we could not stop the scheduling of these projects at this point in time, but if we did find some information at that point, 6 weeks from now, we could terminate the initiation of any new projects.
So we could pull the projects anytime before we put them out to bid?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what happens in that 6 weeks. I mean, once we allocate it today, what happens?
Well, I've got some projects that I think were funded in prior years that have yet to be fully completed. So
We'll begin doing the engineering work on them and bring them back to council to be put out to bid.
I think I agree with David. The process seems to move so slow. Let's keep it in the pipeline. Let's keep it moving forward. I'm tremendously concerned, for example, the Saudi Arabians, their last 2 production reports for October and November, they have continued to increase production. And so it's something that we need to monitor on a regular basis at each meeting.
And who knows, we may see the federal government come in and bail out the oil and gas industry like they did the automobile industry a few years ago. We can only hope.
Yeah, that's going to happen. All right. Okay. Craig, thanks. All right, you want a motion on the MFA? All right, cast your votes on the MFA. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. It's like 7 items. All right, is there a second on the PPA? All right, cast your votes on the PPA. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. 3 items.
Mayor, we do have a presentation today. We have a presentation from Bob Gardner with SCS on solid waste regarding the request for proposal we have received recently regarding solid waste collection.
Mayor, Manager, City Manager, Council. I'm Bob Gardner with SCS Engineers. I last, I think, spoke to you in the spring when we were looking at some of the evaluation of the alternatives relative to your solid waste services and before we had issued an RFP. What I would like to do today is to walk you through the process that we've been through the last, now 6 months relative to a request for proposal that was issued for solid waste collection services. What I'd like to do is kind of walk up through a little bit of the background and what we actually went through in the RFP process. As most of you know, the contract that you currently have with Waste Management is set to expire in coming the end of, right near September or so, August 31st of 2016. A new service contract will be required at that juncture. And so we evaluated various services alternatives, and we came to you back in the spring and presented to you some of the alternatives that we were considering and what we were looking at issuing a request for proposal for. And so we issued that RFP after we considered discussions with the vendors, got their input as to the things that they would like to see in the RFP. They provide the services, what are the kinds of things that they've had troubles with on the existing contract, what things would they like to see change. We've done our own evaluations of that as well. We did a public opinion survey. We went out and polled the public to see what their feelings were about the services that were being provided, what changes would they like to see, and what their sense of how much they would be willing to pay if they wanted to change services and increase the services that they had. So we had those customer focus groups in that overall process. And so we developed the RFP process, and I'll use the term status quo because it's really kind of critical. We wanted to get pricing for the existing services that are currently being provided to the city residents. And then from there, we also requested some alternatives that I'll talk about in a second relative to the services. So in terms of what services do you have right now? You all familiar with the big blue carts that you have? And so you have the big blue carts, plus you're able to put bags out and have those collected. So at the end of the day, hopefully all the garbage is picked up. The automated pickup for those big blue carts along the way. And then you have your process of being able to put your bags out. And so those are the fundamental residential services that you get a week in and week out. And those are provided by city staff as well as Waste Management through your existing contract. You also have, in terms of your monthly bulky waste pickup, what you've gone through in the last couple of weeks, you really kind of get a sense of the importance of this particular service. and this is done on a monthly basis. In addition to the bulky waste pickup, you have your weekly recycling, the little blue bins that you currently have where you put your recycling out, and that is picked up. Now, one of the things that we considered in the overall process of the RFP was to look at some future policy options. And when we're interested in getting some pricing associated with things that we might want to look at, that you might want to consider in the future that we discussed in the spring, the single string commingled recycling. In other words, using basically the big blue carts, which you have for your residential collection. You'd also use a similar cart if you went to that process for what they call single stream recycling. In other words, putting all your materials into one big cart, and that is also picked up by an automated collection vehicle. We also looked at the idea of full containerization. As you know, you currently are able to put out as many bags as you want right now, and those get picked up. And so the idea of going to full containerization using automated side loader pickups, it's a safer, less problems in terms of health and safety issues associated with that. So that was an option we wanted to look at. Also, the idea of 5-day-per-week collection. We heard from the vendors that they said a 5-day-per-week collection, we feel it could be more efficient to do it that way. And so we got some pricing to see if that would be that case. We also looked at the expanded city service area. In our evaluations of the city's collection fleet, our conclusion was we thought that the city, with its existing resources, could expand the areas that it currently services without adding additional costs. So that was one of the things that we looked at in terms of changing the size of the service areas associated with the collection. The RFP itself had a term in it for 6 years with the option for another 6-year term renewal, and there are some provisions in there as to what would, you get to that place of that 6-year, what would allow them to go to the 6-year. There's also provisions for a 3-year renewal, depending on performance along the way. So those are some of the key elements of the request for proposal. Now, the process itself, we advertised, y'all approved the RFP back in June for release, and so it was issued in June of 2015. We had 2 proposal conferences with all the vendors where we allowed them to ask questions. We explained the things that were important to the city in this particular RFP process. It was a fairly complicated request for proposal, and so we had 2 proposal conferences with them to allow them to do that. We also had various questions that they asked in the overall process, and we received those questions and issued written responses to those questions and various addenda along the way in order to clarify the positions relative to that. 2 proposals were received in August, one from Waste Management and one from Republic Services. Those proposals were then evaluated in September, and it was one of the conclusions that we reached was that there needed to ultimately be some additional information provided by the vendors in terms of some inconsistencies that we saw. So we did that technical review, and we ultimately concluded that we needed a best and finals from these 2 vendors that submitted proposals. So we prepared a best and final document, offer document, which described any additional changes that we saw based upon what we saw from the submissions in response to the original RFP. And so those BAFOs were received in November, and when we then had interviews with each of the 2 vendors right before Thanksgiving. And so then the selection committee considered the BAFOs, considered the RFP, considered the results from the interviews, and concluded a couple of things. Number one, both respondents are well-known, Waste Management Republic, the top 2 collection firms in the country. So both were well qualified to provide those services. However, there were some significant and material differences between the 2 proposals, most notably in terms of the resources that were being proposed relative to the number of pieces of equipment and number of staff for the various collection services. The conclusion of the selection committee was that the Waste Management's proposal was considered the most responsive, taking into account price as well as the proposed resource plan. To give you an example of what we're talking about relative to the resource plan, this was one of the most notable that the selection committee saw relative to the bulky waste pickup, and bulky waste pickup is obviously an important service. Waste Management had proposed, well, let me back up a moment. We had defined in the request for proposal certain performance standards relative to bulky waste collection. We told them, here's the average that you need to pick up, and here's the maximum that you need to pick up. And so each of the proposals came in, and we looked at them, and we noticed some pretty significant differences relative to the resources that were being allocated to this particular services. As you can see, the normally Waste Management was going to have 5 grapple trucks. Those are the big trucks with the claws that you see going around the neighborhood. And they would use 11 rear loaders under normal conditions. Republic was proposing 2 grapple trucks and 3 rear loaders. They also indicated that they were going to use a little different process on their residential collection using what is called a Corrado can, where they're going to be siphoning off some of the the types of bulky waste that you could easily pick up and put into the Corrado can along with your bulky waste, with your residential pickup. Anyway, the bottom line here was that you can see from the productivity, at least from our judgment, and the city's judgment as well, relative to what productivity that you could be generated from these resources that were being planned, and we saw a pretty significant difference. If you kind of go down and look at that bottom line, the value per household per month, unit productivity and bulk waste collection, think of it this way, like golf scores, the lower the better, and the lower that number is, the better, and you can see there's about almost a 3 difference between the two in terms of the resources that were being allocated for that. So that was a significant difference between the proposals, and we thought it was material. So the overall recommendation of the selection committee is to authorize the staff to negotiate with Waste Management for the new collection services contract. Any questions?
And again, we'll be bringing back various options of service levels as we get on down the line.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion on the PPA?
The CAT.
All right, ready to vote? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously.
OCAT.
Yeah. Yeah, I called it the PPA. That should, do we have a motion on the EAT?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Cast your votes on the EAT. It passes unanimously. All right, we'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket.
Mayor, I've just been advised that items X and Y need to be stricken on the consent docket. Those were 2 assessment districts, and there are some changes they want to make on the assessment portion of that, so we ask that those be stricken.
All right, X and Y stricken from the consent docket. Any comments from council?
Just AC.
AC?
If I may, I'd like to comment on AA2, please, sir.
AA2? All right, Ed, you want to speak on the fund balance?
I think we should, I guess I'm confused, I mean, from a policy standpoint, that we would vote to allocate it and then we would move it back in 6 weeks if things take a turn for the worse. I don't understand, I guess, how that would all play out. What happens when we allocate it over the next 6 weeks?
Well, in the next 6 weeks, we will work toward getting the projects going, but it's going to take us several months to get these projects out to bid. And so what I think is being suggested, I don't want to speak for Councilman Greenwald, but the thought, as I understood it, we would be continuing to go and start working on getting the projects designed and out to bid. And of course, there's no commitment until after the contract. Even after they're out to bid, we don't have to work the contract. So there's no financial commitment until after the contract is let. So there's several months down the line before there would actually be an expenditure of any of those funds.
I just think that it's prudent to wait for 6 weeks, and I'd move for a continuance. I mean, if council wants to go ahead and move the funds, I think that's fine. I mean, I've tried to speak in vague terms, but I think there are real risks, I think, nobody knows what's going to happen, but there is the risk of cataclysmic things happening. I mean, there are companies in Oklahoma City, major employers, who, the price doesn't have to go down, they're not going to survive for 6 months. They are going to be in violation of their loan covenants within 6 months. They are going to be faced with bankruptcy or other unpleasant alternatives. And that could ripple through the banking. I'm not saying it's exactly like the 1980s, but there is the potential whether it's probable or not, there is the potential of something cataclysmic happening in 2016. And I think we would know so much more by February 6th that before we start moving money or making any decisions, I think it's prudent just to wait until we have that financial conference. I think that some of the 10-Ks that will be filed in late January, early February will be shocking. And I think it will give a much different picture of the economic realities going forward. The hedges are now expiring, and the real exposure to this commodity price is only now beginning. And I just think that it's prudent to wait until we can meet with Russell Evans. I really wish the chamber were there. I mean, I wish, but in any case, it's February 6th. I just don't think it's that long, and we've waited this long. I think we can move the funds immediately thereafter if it looks like. But I think if you move the $8 million and you go down to 12-13%, and you start to see the acceleration and decrease of sales tax revenues, you could find yourself very easily at 8-9%. And I just think it's prudent and fiscally conservative to wait 6 weeks. We will get so much more information at the end of January and the first week of February.
And I think we share your concerns about the energy industry. I think one of the facts that we got in one of our recent presentations was that the energy industry was 3% of our employment. So, I mean, if we were a board of directors of an oil company, I think you'd be speaking and we should be listening and acting. But
right.
we are not as reliant on the energy industry as we've been in the past. And I think the councilman made a good point that if there is a dire situation, come February and March, we could still alter our spending in this or other ways. But at the same time, we have streets that need to be repaired, and we're sitting on $50 or $60 million in the bank. And I think we owe it to our citizens to address their primary concerns as well. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer here, but I don't see a reason to just stop and stop the projects from moving down the pipeline when we know we could pull the plug on it.
The only thing I would say in response, Mick, is that when Russell Evans talked to us last January, he made very clear that it's not just a 3% correlation, that if you want to make a prediction of how your sales tax revenues, the most important is your rig count and the energy industry. So I agree, if you look at our top 40 employers, only 3 are oil and gas companies, but I don't think it's that simple, and I think that was the central message I took from Russell Evans is, if you want to predict how your sales tax revenues are going to occur and what's going to happen to your fund balance, it's actually the energy industry that is by far the tightest correlation.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with you there either. It's not 3% of the economy. It's just 3% of the employment base, and those are some of our best paying jobs. I didn't mean to completely dismiss what you're trying to say.
There's another factor that's out there, and that's that if we pull back on our capital construction, that will just be another slowdown in the economy. We're not necessarily the huge driver out there, but another $8 million in construction is helpful to keep the movement of the economy going forward. And so there's balances out there. There's not a right answer on this. This is a judgment call.
Well, I agree with just about everything that's been said, so it's not an easy decision for me. But I think whenever there are two sides, I usually side on going slow. So I would second his motion.
Let me ask a question about that. How much of the $8 million, I know it's almost like getting down to splitting hairs here, but how much of the $8 million would be spent by this date that Ed proposes?
None of it would be spent by the time we get to the...
And can we stop at that date?
Yes.
I mean, the next council meeting after that?
Yes. Anytime. And we can stop at any time until the first contract.
Okay.
I mean, we could have Russell Evans come to our next meeting and speak if need be, but the bottom line is, I agree with what Jim Couch just said. If we decide to stop this process, which moves very, very slowly, we're hurting our paving contractors. We're hurting people that may be laid off of their jobs. And so the number one thing in Ward A is what my people are telling me, is to fix the roads and get the roads fixed. And so I'd like to see it move forward, but monitor it closely and stop if necessary.
Larry?
Yeah. The number one priority of the residents in Ward 3 is to fix the streets. and that's what the money is going for, to fix the streets. The project timeline to get the work actually done elongates that. I saw Eric here. The last time we did this, it was late into the calendar year, even into the next calendar year on some of the projects before they got rolling because of the engineering and the letting of contracts, et cetera. Is that not the case? And so there is an opportunity to put the brakes on as you move forward. You're not writing a check tomorrow. You're just saying, this is the way we're going. If a catastrophic event occurs, we can always react. But short of that, the people in Ward 3, I think, want conservative financial policies. This is not like the other government entities. We're not jeopardizing the future of the city, and we are moving forward to solve a problem that is long overdue in solving. So I'm going to vote to keep the project moving and to monitor it closely, as the words that Mark used.
All right, well, Ed's made a motion, and it sounded like James wanted to second it and have a vote on whether or not we go ahead with the $8 million expenditure today or defer it until after the meeting in February.
Motion.
That's the way I read it.
I think
February 9th would be the meeting day.
I don't want to leave anybody out there that's listening to think that any of us don't have a mandate from our citizens to fix the roads. I mean, we all understand that. I mean, I don't think it's I don't think that's the issue. The issue is how we handle it financially. We all believe that we need better roads. $1 million in my ward, 6 months after it's finished, you won't be able to find it. I mean, there's so many bad roads that you could put $10 million in my ward, $15 million in the roads, and I'd still get complaints every day about roads. So roads are in pretty bad shape, and I think we all agree with that. I think the question is about the policy, on the fiscal side of the policy, not whether we're all committed to fixing the streets. I think I'm not going to vote for the motion based on the assurance that we could stop on the 9th of February without expending any money. Based on your comment that that's the case, none of the money would be gone. I would seek to amend the motion to put it on the council agenda for the next council meeting after our meeting with him for further discussion. I'm trying to cut the baby in half here. Okay. No, my motion is to amend, and he seconded it. He accepted the amendment.
Well, they seem to be in conflict of each other. I don't know.
Vote on deferment first, and then if that fails, vote on the agenda after.
No, if he's proposing that it be amended, then you have to decide whether you want to amend it or not.
Right.
Your current motion, and you don't vote on both of them.
I'm looking around the horseshoe here, and I don't believe there are 5 votes to stop it. And what I'm saying is, why don't we set it on the council meeting for the first meeting after we have our budget hearing to have a further discussion about it?
But Pete, you could, I'm not trying to control things, but why don't we wait until we see the outcome of this first vote, and then the mayor would allow you to make that second motion?
Well, that would be okay, except I want to amend this one.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
That's okay. No, it's okay. I understand. I just think the simplest way to do it is just defer this whole thing until the 6th and not get is it going to be an up-down vote, or is it going to be perceived as an up-down vote on who likes streets and who doesn't like streets? Hell, we all like streets. We'd like more of them. Better.
We need to take a vote. It sounds like it's 6-2. I mean, we already took a vote. So if you want to put it on the agenda for the financial conference on February 9th?
February 2nd, so we would put this on the...
For the 9th.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to have a discussion about it. But
Right.
We'd revisit it on February 9th.
And we'd move forward today.
Right.
Okay, so I'll withdraw. Can I do that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion and second Pete's motion.
All right. Ready to vote?
What are we voting on?
We're voting on your idea of bringing up the conversation on February 9th.
Just put as an agenda item, have it on the agenda.
That's right. All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, now we're on the consent docket. And Mark wanted to talk about item AA2.
Yes, please. This is a resolution approving a project agreement with ODOT for some traffic signals at Sugarloaf Drive and Northwest 150th. There are 3 homeowners associations out there, two of them being from Blue Quell Ridge and one known as Silver Creek. And they are very active, and they are great homeowners associations, and they have been very concerned about the fact as to whether they are going to get a traffic signal at this street or at this intersection. And so I've asked Eric to, if you all will indulge me, to briefly let him speak to give a timeline to those HOAs as to when this work will be completed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the signal, the traffic signal that's proposed at 150th and Sugarloaf, it was actually a signal that was warranted back in 2013. However, funding wasn't available at that time when the Traffic Commission approved that. And so the city staff made application in 2014 to make this an ACOG-funded project, and it was then awarded at that time. So the funding comes available from ACOG-funded projects approximately a year later, which occurred this fall, so it's now a fully funded project. It does not cost the city anything because it's a safety project. It's 100% funded. They're going through the process now to advertise this project and have construction begin in the February-March of 2016 timeframe. So this project is moving forward, and it's a project that should be completed in the spring.
Sometime March, April, May?
In that time frame. I mean, there's obviously, when we've got to look at utilities and some of those things, but without having the contractor to really give us a timeline, I would hedge to just say, let's just say spring of 16, we'll have that completed.
Great. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it.
All right, ready to vote the consent docket? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. On to the concurrence docket. All right, any comments or questions on the concurrence? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. That moves us on to item 9. These are items that require a separate vote. We'll start with a zoning case in Ward 6 at 1301 Southwestern Avenue. It's currently R1 single family and a scenic river overlay design that would become a new SPUD if approved. Is the developer here, the request? Yeah. And just a show of hands, did anyone show up today to protest this item? Okay. David, do you mind telling us what you have in mind here?
Sure. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is the Ferris wheel portion of the Wheeler District project. This is one in which we were required to do a SPUD after we had previously received a revocable permit. Staff discovered that a portion of our site's actually within city-owned property, so we put forth a SPUD to allow the Ferris wheel. We did go to the River Committee, who granted approval. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval. As you know, this is a much larger project, and when we come in with our PUD for the Wheeler District, we will include this back in to make sure all the commitments in this are part of the overall PUD.
Okay. How about a motion then to move this forward?
Question?
Yeah, sure. Larry?
David?
Yes, sir.
There's been some talk in the past about the Ferris wheel and who owns the Ferris wheel. Who owns the Ferris wheel? Would you just go on record and...
I believe my client, Humphreys Partners 2006 LLC, owns the Ferris wheel.
And not the city?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question also. You have any kind of a timeline?
On the Ferris wheel? Mm-hmm. I believe very soon. We needed this to allow permits to be issued. So I believe they're moving very quickly. Summer.
I mean, if this is issued, what does that mean?
They hope to have it operational by summer.
Okay.
And we're in the process right now of drafting the PUD for the overall district. So that process is moving forward as well.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a motion? Yes. Second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 9B is a zoning case in Ward 3 to close a portion of North St. Charles Street. Larry, you okay with this?
Has anybody signed up on this?
No.
This was approved by the Planning Commission. I move for approval.
All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9C is up for final hearing today. Council will recall this is an item that deals with truancy. Is anyone here to speak on this item today? All right, how about a motion from council?
Your Honor, before we do, I just want to announce I'm going to vote against it, and I'm not trying to change anybody's minds, but the concerns I have is that, the ordinance will say, with one truancy, the parents are subject to the fine, even though the enforcement informally won't occur until after 5 ordinances. I just don't like that concept. And then secondly, there's not a provision that requires informing the parents to notify them that their students have been truant or absent without excuse. And if we're going to subject the parents to fines, I think the education institutions have a responsibility to notify the parents that can be substantiated, for example, such as certified mail with return receipt. It's going to sound like I'm against requiring students to go to school. I'm not. I've just got these 2 concerns with respect to the specific ordinance. So,
okay.
Is this the same ordinance that has been enforced in the past by the district attorney?
We took the language directly from the state statute, Councilman, and the statutory requirement for schools to notify parents exists under the statute.
Okay.
Can you tell me what that statutory requirement is as it relates to notification? Is it a verbal notification, such as leaving a message on a cell phone or the home phone?
It would take me a few minutes to go pull up the statute. I don't remember exactly, Councilman.
That's okay. I'm just, again, the difference between the enforcement and the way the ordinance is written, maybe it's the libertarian coming out in me. I just don't think we should enact ordinances if we're not going to enforce them the way that they're written. Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion? Yes. All right. Cast your votes. It passes 7-1. Item 9D is also up for final hearing today, and this makes some minor changes to our retirement system. Is there a motion here?
Move it.
Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9E is a public hearing. This has to do discrimination on housing. We have one person that has signed up to speak. Troy Stevenson. We lose Troy somewhere along the line? All right. Well, any comments from council today?
I don't know if one thing that we were maybe going to look into is where Oklahoma City is in terms of peer cities, in terms of having a human rights commission, and also in terms of LGBT protections, in terms of discrimination. I know that, again, Tulsa passed, their city council passed it unanimously 6 months ago. I think Norman is going to pass it unanimously tonight, or is expected to pass it unanimously tonight. I'm just wondering if we're an outlier in those 2 areas.
Well, when this comes up for final hearing, why don't you just add an amendment next meeting to add that to it?
There's a couple questions. So one is we're still doing research on that.
Okay.
And staff's working on that. I will say that I do believe, and I'm not sure if this is verified, but I think Tulsa may be the only state or the only city in the state that does have a human rights commission.
Well, Norman does.
Norman. And I know that Houston does not have one. And Councilman White asked why ours was stricken down, and ours was stricken down in the 90s or discontinued in the 90s. Partly, I think, political, partly because of a Supreme Court decision, a St. Paul decision that came down that I may need some help on this, that basically says hate speech can be a First Amendment right. And it impacted what can be done. Hate actions, hate crimes, those are crimes, need to be investigated by the police department, and there's a mechanism in place to do that. But if you say something, that more falls in the line of protected First Amendment speech. And I'm outside of my area of expertise on this, but that was one of the reasons that was given for the discontinuation of the Human Rights Commission in the 90s.
But I guess the question is, if you're going to do an ordinance like this, which is to prevent discrimination in housing, not speech, but you're not, based on ethnicity or religion or sexual orientation, what is the vehicle for somebody to complain or for the city to respond? When Tulsa made their thing 6 months ago, or Norman tonight, that's just going to be plugged right into a Human Rights Commission. For Oklahoma City, what would that be?
We refer to the appropriate authorities, whether it's federal or state, of the Attorney General's office or federal authorities based upon the nature of the complaint.
The reality of the powers of the Human Rights Commissions under the statute is that they're sort of a mediating body. They really have no ability to lawfully enforce or make prohibitions on discrimination. So they look into an issue, then they're able to make a recommendation. If it's not followed by the parties that are involved, then they refer it on to the Attorney General's office. So we essentially will have the same flow for complaints. Persons who feel that they are subject to discriminatory practices can make a complaint to the city, and then we'll refer it on to the Attorney General's office. That's what we've drafted in our ordinance.
So when Tulsa passed the LGBT protection 6 months ago, and if Norman does tonight, and somebody brought a complaint to their Human Rights Commission, then they would refer that to the state if they couldn't mediate, if they couldn't come to a settlement?
Essentially, that's their only ultimate enforcement ability, is to refer.
And are they effective at mediating and keeping things out of,
That I wouldn't know, Councilman. The LGBT wording that you've requested, I just wanted to let you know, will be on as a floor amendment on the final hearing, which is at the next council meeting.
And so if that were adopted, or even just this is adopted, somebody brings the complaint to Oklahoma City and we just tell them, call the Attorney General's office, or we investigate it and then refer it to the Attorney General's office, or how does that work?
We don't really have an investigative arm for this. The city doesn't. So it is basically a referral. There's nothing that prohibits a subject of discrimination to go directly to the state in the first place, whether you have a Human Rights Commission or not. Now the AG can say, please go take it to the Human Rights Commission first and see if you can work it out. But that's the extent of the enforcement capability.
Do you have a sense of what cities in Oklahoma City and peer cities in the region and country have Human Rights Commissions?
No, I have not looked into that, Councilman.
But we'll have that research completed by the final hearing?
That's our plan.
It seems like that's the bigger policy question, and I guess you'd have to know if you're an outlier or not, but why was Oklahoma City's Human Rights Commission disbanded in the late 90s, and does this city council agree with that city council that disbanded it?
Okay. All right, do we have a motion on item 9E?
Troy's here. You called him earlier, he just stepped in.
Oh, he did, good. Troy?
Hi. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for giving me a moment to speak. My name is Troy Stevenson. I'm the executive director of Freedom Oklahoma. We're Oklahoma's statewide LGBT rights organization. I would just like to ask the council to seriously look at these protections that have been put forward. Oklahoma City is one of the few cities of its size in the nation that doesn't have these kind of protections on the books. In fact, Tulsa and Norman, as of tonight, will have them. The Human Rights Commission is also a very important piece. I very much understand what you're saying, but having that mediation is vital. It does work in other cities, and having, not just for the LGBT community, but any minority member of the community, having that resource to air a grievance to your municipality is vital, and it really helps minority communities feel like they have a voice in the city. So I would just ask you to seriously undertake this and You'll each be hearing from us soon with more information. Thank you.
Now, in regards to the Human Rights Commission, for us, the city having a Human Rights Commission, I see some good in it, but if you're not going to properly staff it and fund it, then, you know, it becomes pointless. Because if you don't have the staff to sit there and to do the mediation and so forth, it kind of become pointless in my view. I'm all, you know, bring it up to the Human Rights Commission, but are we going to actually properly fund it and staff it? Is my question. And then, as we talk about discrimination for as housing, HUD, and I want to give an example here. HUD provides a contract to Metropolitan for housing, and Metropolitan for housing has been investigating discrimination for as housing, and recently they forwarded a complaint to the Attorney General. And this particular complaint, African American tenants were complaining that a particular landlord was in exchange for, let me back up, this particular landlord, tenants complained that the landlord was basically saying, hey, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to evict you. The AG's office stepped up to the plate and went after that particular landlord. So I think the system that's currently in place is working. I would love to see a Human Rights Commission, the city to have a Human Rights Commission, but if we're not going to properly fund it, then what's the point? If we're not going to properly make sure that you have staff in place, then what's the point?
To John's point, could we check with Tulsa and Norman and ask them what kind of staffing and what kind of budget it requires to do their Human Rights Commissions? Thanks.
Yeah, Larry?
Mayor, Jim, answer a question for me. I thought the reason that we got into bringing this particular legislation, for want of a better term, up was to bring us into conformance with either state or federal regulations. Is that, did I miss something there?
That's correct, Councilman. Our office received a request from the Planning Department to insert certain wording into the ordinance so that we would be in compliance with the federal grants requirements that they receive in planning.
And the way that it is currently is written right now does accomplish that goal?
That's correct.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. We're ready to move this forward? Cast your votes on 9E. Passed unanimously. And a final hearing will be on which date, Francis?
January 5th.
January 5th will be a final hearing on this issue. All right, Francis is reminding us on 9D, which was the changes to the retirement system that we made a while ago. The IRS is requesting or requiring us to have this in place before the end of the year, and so she says the emergency is in order here. All right, we're voting on the emergency on item 9D. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. All right, that moves us on to item 9F. This is a public hearing today, some small modifications on some of the licensing dealing with the taxi industry. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on this item today? All right, how about a motion then to move it on? Cast your votes. 9F passes unanimously. Item 9G is an item that's being introduced today, and Mark Cranenberg is here to tell us more.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council. Mark Cranenberg, Airports Department. The main purpose of introducing this ordinance is to modify Chapter 10, which is the aviation chapter in the municipal code. Principally, it will include special provisions related to parking and also the movement of vehicle traffic at Will Rogers World Airport. We believe this is necessary because the volume of traffic and the different types of vehicles that are providing transportation to and from the airport have increased a lot over the last few years. The changes in Chapter 10 will adopt language that will provide for better enforcement for police and airport administration to ensure safe and orderly operations of ground transportation around the terminal environment. Also define more clearly where different types of vehicles can park and wait on airport property. Define where each class of vehicle can load and unload passengers and baggage, and require drivers of all vehicles to remain with their vehicle. Vehicles for hire will see very little effect from this ordinance, as the change is consistent with their current operating procedures that they agree to and abide by already on airport property. And the drivers to private passenger vehicles will see a change only that they will be allowed to unload and load in the inside curb lane in the upper and lower level. The only change to Chapter 32 is adding a Chapter 10 reference to existing references in the section for citations for illegal parking. And the only change that we're considering to Chapter 33 is adding the Chapter 10 reference to existing sections to the table of fines, which is in Chapter 33. Will be designating a $50 fine for violations of designated parking and for loading and unloading passengers and bags. And these changes have all been coordinated through criminal justice, municipal courts, and police, and request your favorable consideration and move it forward.
All right, any comments or questions for Mark?
Mark, I do have a question, and it's somewhat related to this, but you know, the new rental car facility will be completed, I believe, February or March or something.
In March, the rental car company should be moving into the new facility.
Will people, most of the people who will utilize or have access to that are people that are coming into the city via the airlines. But will the general public here in Oklahoma City be able to access that? And I'm thinking in particular with respect to viewing or experiencing the art associated with the new facility. Will there be parking or provisions made to allow just the general public to go inside?
Yes. Yes, sir. The general public will be able to use the new facility as the general public continues to come in and just use our existing rental car counters today.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, item is being introduced today. Public hearing set for January 5th and final adoption set for January 12th. Is there a motion? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9H, in the wake of our agreement with AFSCME, this would approve the pay plan adjustment for that group of managers who are not part of AFSCME but historically have been had their benefits reflected. Is there a motion to move this forward? All right, we're voting on item 9H. Cast your votes, and it passes unanimously. Item 9I, they're making some changes to the comprehensive plan, and Randy Enns is here.
Thank you. I'm Randy Enns with the Planning Department. I'm here to discuss 3 amendments to Plan OKC that are on your agenda today. They're all very similar, so we'll talk about them all at once. Just as a reminder, there are 2 ways to initiate a comprehensive plan amendment. First is by request. It's generally initiated by the property owner. Typically, it's related to a specific development. All 3 of the amendments here today are of this nature, and in early 2016, you will see applications associated with each of these come before you on your agenda. The second type is an amendment associated with the maintenance of the plan. That's staff-initiated. It's kind of a big picture, and it's to account for changes in the market and or in the availability of the city's services. And that will be done every 2 years. The 3 amendments in front of you today, as they're listed in the order they appear on your agenda, are at Northwest 10th and Cemetery Road, Northwest 164th and County Line Road, and Southwest 44th and Mustang Road. All 3 amendments are similar in that they are changing the land use designation from urban reserve to urban low intensity. Here's the land use map of the city, and it shows you where the amendments are at a citywide scale. Some background for you. The urban reserve layer is a land use typology in Plan OKC that covers areas of the city that are rural in nature and have large unbroken parcels of land but do not yet have urban levels of city services. For example, they lack a connection to sewer or water. These areas are expected to urbanize over the next 40 years at some point in time. The purpose of the layer is to retain the land in such a way that it can develop with urban densities and in urban patterns in the future as those services are delivered in an efficient manner. To that point, the things that are considered when we lift the urban reserve layer are the ability to connect to city water and sewer, being in an urban response time for fire service, being consistent and compatible with the surrounding land uses, and the need for additional urban low land, intensity land in that quadrant. Item number 1 is at Northwest 10th and Cemetery Road. It was designated urban reserve due to the lack of sewer service that existed at the time that Plan OKC was adopted. Since that time, there have been developments in the area, and the utility department has determined that this area can be served from a line that has been installed along Cemetery Road. Item number 2 is just south of Northwest 164th and County Line Road, on County Line Road. Currently, water service is over a half-mile away. The area is the northern portion of a proposed development called Northwoods Place, which extends all the way south to the Northwest 150th. Because of that, water can be extended through that development to this area. So it will be adjacent to Northwoods Place. Item number 3 is the 160 acres on the northwest corner of Southwest 44th and Mustang Road. Due to recent developments surrounding this parcel since Plan OKC's adoption, water and sewer can now be provided from the east. So, due to these changes in condition, Planning Commission adopted the changes to the comprehensive plan in October and November of this year, and they are now before you to receive. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, Larry, Ed?
So who's asking for, I mean, who's initiating this process? Is it the developers?
Generally, it is developers. One of these cases was initiated by staff to accommodate a development that was, it was one parcel. We looked at the larger area, so we initiated it. We thought a much larger area would be ready to come in. So as developers come to us, we consider the application generally.
I mean, without getting into the specifics, I mean, these are obviously in the periphery, far periphery of the city. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of sprawl? And are we just going to take amendments to the comprehensive plan each time a developer in the farthest periphery of the city wants to develop?
But by the nature of urban reserve, most of it is on the periphery of the city, and it's meant to maintain the land in such a way that it can be developed in an urban pattern and to prevent kind of that leapfrog development approach. All these are contiguous with existing urban low development. It's kind of that time. Utilities have reached them. We can now serve them efficiently.
Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, Aubrey Hammontree, Planning Director. I just wanted to add to what Randy said. The purpose for developing this urban reserve layer is so that we could manage growth as it's ready to occur. So we anticipated that some of those areas would be immediately, within a year, 6 months, a year to 2 years of adopting the plan, immediately ready to serve efficiently. Others may not be ready for 40, 50 years, if ever, in that condition. So it's a growth management tool so that we can be more efficient with making those decisions on a case-by-case basis. So the tool of the plan is that we keep it up to date, we respond to market factors, we respond to incremental changes in growth and development, and we can assess those as they come into the city and every 2 years as we go back and look at the plan comprehensively. So this is working the way that we intended it to work.
So are we extending water and sewage to any of these three, or is the developer?
I believe
the developer is extending water from water that's already been extended to that area, but they're extending water to their development and sewer.
There's no additional expenditure from the Water Utilities Trust or?
No, sir.
Okay.
And I believe in these cases, too, that the boundaries of these that we're allowing to develop or urbanize would be held where they are. For example, the one in northwest Oklahoma City, the jagged line that's on the northern edge is a creek. So it's very improbable that water and sewer services will extend north of that to open up an additional basin to allow for that sprawl to occur. So there are some little edges on that urban reserve layer that it's practical and it is a managed type of growth that we understand happens. And we also understand that as the plan is originally adopted, that some of those little edges feather out, and then there's probably a lull for a larger period of time.
Okay, thank you all. All right, do we have a motion then to vote on these individually? This is a 9I1. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And then item 9I2. Sir. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 9I3. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 9J is a resolution to approve the Art Master Plan, and Robbie Counsel is here.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Robbie Kenzel, Liaison for Arts and Cultural Affairs. Thank you, Sarah. Before I begin, I want to recognize the people that are here in support of the master plan. Please go ahead and stand, everyone. These are stakeholders to the master plan process, board members of the Cultural Development Corporation, arts commissioners. Thank you very much. And three that I would like to stay standing, because I want to point them out especially, is Michael Laird, who is the president right now of the Cultural Development Corp, and I'll explain why that's important. And then also two of our arts commissioners that led a task force on this effort, Jim Hassenbeck and Liz Eichmann. You'll both stand. Worked alongside them very closely. Yeah. So the process started when the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs was established in 2012. Immediately that fall, the SuperNOFA was announced from the federal government, and the National Endowment for the Arts announced its Our Town grant. The Cultural Development Corporation was the applicant, and the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs worked very closely with them to submit an application that was then granted in July of the following year. And the reason that we believe that that was granted, because this is a highly competitive process, is because the city and the Cultural Development Corporation had worked together very closely for 10 years on cultural plans and the implementation of those plans. And then also because the money was being asked to carry out a very important action in the cultural plan, and that was because of the 1% for our ordinance that was enacted in 2009. And so the task force then worked on a national competition to hire a consultant, and Gail Goldman out of San Diego was hired. And she met in Oklahoma City on three different occasions with several stakeholder groups. Each time there were public artist meetings. There were focus groups with developers, architects, neighborhood leaders, and commercial district leaders. And then also interviews were held inside the city with the different department heads, trusts, and authorities to make sure that any recommendations she made would be feasible. And out of these emerged 13 priorities. The first one was to set the bar high, not to go for quantity but quality in the public artwork that was selected. The second was to involve artists early. There can be several cost savings by involving the artists as solution providers very early in the process. The next one was to streamline internal allocations, and these would be to get the process started as early as possible with the handoff between Public Works Finance and the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs. Standardizing administrative practices with really good sets of policies and procedure documents. Clarifying the role of the Arts Commission. They were established in 1980, but we haven't really gone back and looked at the ordinance and what it states their role is for the city. Simplifying the permit process, with often really involves being more transparent about what the process is. Engaging the private sector. This is mostly through technical assistance, helping them achieve what they are trying to do. Expanding public art into neighborhoods. This is happening right now with programs that the city has like Strong Neighborhood Initiative, Commercial District Revitalization. Providing a resource for finding artists. This was a big one. We right now, Council has approved the second annual call for this since we started the master planning process, and then we will publish that directory after it's recommended by the Arts Commission. Building local artist capacity through trainings and workshops, business of art guidelines, and different activities like that. Creating a mechanism to accept gifts of artworks. These are a rational approach to where those artworks should be cited, how they should be paid for, to be installed, how they should be maintained. And inventorying public art sites. These are through the planning studies that we do, physical master plans that can occur before public artwork is secured. And increasing the visibility of public artwork in Oklahoma City. So right now we have all the artwork from the city, the trusts and authorities, all listed on Culture Now Museum Without Walls, so you can have a self-guided tour. We also have a very robust Facebook page, and we have a committee of the Arts Commission working on a social engagement strategy that should be launched next year. So in all, there are 3 pages of recommendations. As you can see here, several of those that are lined in red are already completed because they were fairly easy to do with the activities that the Arts Commission was already working on. Those that are already in process are in yellow, and those that we are waiting for permission to go ahead and begin working on are in blue, and these would involve things like updates to ordinances. And so with that, if you have any questions, we have people here in addition to me that could help answer them, and we hope for your support.
All right. Robbie, thank you. Any comments or questions? Really appreciate the way this is shaping up. You know, when we created your position and trying to help coordinate all of our art entities, I think I'm really pleased with the way it's turned out. So thanks for your work.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Today's amendment is to, today's resolution is to approve the Arts Master Plan. Is there a motion? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9K is a resolution to approve the Emergency Operations Plan, and Frank Barnes is here.
Good morning. My voice is a little hoarse because I've got a cold, so hopefully you can hear me and understand me. Thank you for letting me speak to you this morning. We have presented to you for adoption the Warning Annex, which is a portion of the city's emergency operations plan. There we go. Okay. Within the city, we have roles and responsibilities with regards to the outdoor warning siren system. The Office of Emergency Management develops the policy to present to City Council for adoption. We also handle the public education and outreach to educate the public about the siren system and what the sirens mean and what you should do when you hear them. We provide decision-making and activation support to 911 communications, and we provide a backup or alternate site for the siren system activation at the Regional Multi-Agency Coordination Center. 911 Communications is the primary site for the outdoor warning sirens system activation, and they conduct the weekly tests on Saturday at noon. Information Technology designs and builds the system. They handle the system's upgrades and improvements, and they are responsible for the system maintenance and repair. This is the city's outdoor warning siren system. We have 182 sirens in 3 counties. It is a very large system. May not be the largest in the country, but it is very large. The current policy, or old policy, is what we call a county-based activation. The National Weather Service issues tornado warnings by county. And so with the old policy, we activated all the tornado sirens in the county for which the warning was issued. And if they issued a tornado warning that covered 2 or more counties, then we activated the sirens in those counties. So it was possible that they could activate a tornado warning that called for Canadian, Cleveland, and Oklahoma County, and it would result in all 182 sirens being activated. We also, under the current policy, activate each time a new warning is issued by the National Weather Service. No all clear is given, and we test on Saturday at noon. Under the new proposed policy, we will activate the siren by what we call a threat-based sector activation. Within the National Weather Service tornado warning, which, again, they issue by county, within that warning is what is called a storm-based warning polygon. And so what we will begin doing is we will activate the sirens that warning polygon covers, or we'll activate the sectors that warning polygon covers in whole or in part, which will result in warning a smaller portion of the city than the old policy. Also new in the policy is we allow for activation of the sirens when public safety personnel in the field report seeing a tornado. We'll also be able to activate the sirens under the new policy when there's other credible evidence that a tornado threat is occurring in Oklahoma City. And lastly, we're also new to the policy is that we will 911 Communications can activate the sirens based upon a recommendation from the Office of Emergency Management. Okay. The area to be warned is new. As I said, we're going to use a threat-based sector warning. We'll activate the outdoor warning system sectors in the portion of the city that is threatened by the tornado. And we have divided the outdoor warning siren system into 9 sectors. There we go. So those were the 9 sectors. When we designed the sectors, we wanted to make sure that none of the sectors crossed county lines because, again, the National Weather Service still issues tornado warnings by county, and then within that warning is the storm-based warning polygon. So we wanted to make sure none of the sectors crossed county lines, and then also we wanted to use readily identifiable landmarks. And the interstates, the turnpikes, and some of our major surface streets provided the best landmarks that could help everyone readily identify what the sector boundaries were. And this is the map displayed in cardinal directions so that we can also describe it not by numbers but by cardinal directions referring to the sectors, for example, southwest Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, or southeast Oklahoma City and Cleveland County. Now, before I move on, as you look at the sector map, I'll ask you to think which of those 9 sectors up there do you think has the most warnings. So just think about that for a minute, and I'll show you the results at the end. This is a screenshot of the WeatherWarn computer program. It shows the 9 sectors. It shows the sirens, or the color coding of the sirens, and each siren is numbered. It's what's called an address. The address is used to activate the sirens. And so in this screenshot, you see the 9 sectors, you see the color coding of the sirens, and you see each siren's individual address. Also new in this policy is that we can make recommendations to 911 communications on activating the sirens as well as what sectors to activate or not activate. Those recommendations would be based on the following criteria. One is the storm-based warning polygon that's contained within the tornado warning, the current location of the storm or tornado, its direction of travel and speed. This 4th item is important, location of known planned events. We have many large outdoor planned events, especially in the springtime, especially during peak tornado season. Many of those outdoor planned events need a lot of time to evacuate those people or have them leave the area and get out of the threat. And so if we saw a tornado and based on its track we felt that it threatened that outdoor event even though it was not in the warning polygon, we would recommend activation of the sirens in that sector so that that venue could be alerted and they could shut down the event and evacuate people and have them head out away from the area. And then the timing of the storm or tornado in relation to the city. We will continue to activate the sirens when there's additional warnings. One of the differences in the policy is it will allow a little bit of discretion. So, for example, if we get a tornado warning that's issued at 3 o'clock and another one that is issued at 3:01, then we probably aren't going to sound it twice. We'll just do it one time because that would be sufficient. Also, we have the flexibility of adding on sectors should they issue another warning in a short time after the first warning. We can add sectors to the ongoing warning and make sure that everybody gets warned. What we want the public to do changes a little bit because we're now warning the public that the tornado threat is nearby. We want them to take shelter and seek more information. The taking of shelter is a personal decision. Some people may simply want to go indoors to a sturdy building. Others may want to go into their storm shelter or safe room. And others who don't have a storm shelter or safe room may want to shelter in place on the lowest level, innermost room. And then seeking more information is also a personal choice. Some people may rely on a NOAA weather radio. Other people may have a smartphone app. Other people may go to turn on their TV, listen to commercial radio, or use an online website. Okay, what stays the same is we still will not sound an all clear. So when you hear a tornado siren sound more than once, that means that there have been new and additional threats issued or warnings issued, and we will still test on Saturday at noon. The benefits of this new policy is we expect to reduce what we call overwarning, warning more people than necessary, by about 69%. We will eliminate false warnings, which means warning portions of the city when there is no threat to that portion of the city. The policy allows for increased coordination and collaboration between 911 communications and the Office of Emergency Management. And there's still a slight overwarning that will occur, which will benefit the motoring public. The polygons will never exactly match the sectors, and so there will always be some overwarning. And in a few examples that we've looked at, we see that the overwarning provides advance notice to people who may be motoring or driving towards or into the affected area. So one of the things we did in working with the National Weather Service on this project is we asked them to take the tornado warnings from 2010 through 2015 and overlay the storm-based warning polygon onto the new sectors. There were over 40 examples in this time frame, and with a few exceptions, maybe one or two exceptions, using the sectors definitely reduced the amount of the city that was warned. So in this example from May 10th, 2010, using the new sectors, we would activate Sector 3, 4, and 6, which is Southwest Oklahoma City in Cleveland County, Southeast Oklahoma City in Cleveland County, and Southeast Oklahoma City in Oklahoma County. Previously, we would have lit up all the sirens in Oklahoma and Cleveland County. In this example from May 19th of 2013, this was on Sunday, this was a warning that included Canadian and Oklahoma County. Under the old policy, we'd activate all the sirens in Canadian and Oklahoma County. Under the new policy, we'd only activate the sirens in the sectors you see on the screen. This is from May 20th, 2013. Again, it was tornado warning for Cleveland and Oklahoma County, would have resulted in sounding sirens and all the sirens in both those counties. You can see from this graphic that we then reduced the area warned to sectors 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you can see in this example, we catch a corner of Sector 5, but again, you've got motoring public on the interstates that may be heading into the affected area, so it provides some warning as they approach the threatened area. In this example, you'll notice the warning would have covered 3 counties. We would have lit up all 182 sirens for this tornado threat. And based on the shape of the polygon, the threat was moving from northwest to southeast, catching the southeast corner of the city. Using the new sectors, we would warn a much smaller area. And again, as you can see from the graphic, we're looking at sectors 2, 3, 5, and 6. And in this example from December 14th, 2014, the tornado warning was for Oklahoma County. All the sirens on that day sounded in Oklahoma County. Under the new policy, we would have sounded the sirens in the sector for where the tornado threat was actually located, which was in extreme northeast Oklahoma City. And then this is May 6, 2015. Again, the tornado warning would have been for Cleveland and Oklahoma County. Could have resulted, or did result in all the sirens in those 2 counties being sounded. With the new policy, we only sound Sector 4 and 6. And then May 6th, 2015, the warning was for Oklahoma County. In this example, we warn a much smaller portion of Oklahoma County, warning sectors 5 and 7. So, let's see if your answer or what you thought was correct. Sector 4, which is southeast Oklahoma City in Cleveland County, has the most warnings. Sector 3 and 6 were tied for second place. That's southwest Oklahoma City in Cleveland County and southeast Oklahoma City in Oklahoma County. In fact, sectors 4 and 6 actually have the most warnings combined, which may surprise some people because they tend to think it's the southwest part of the city, but actually the most warnings have been issued for the southeast part of the city from 2010 to 2015. And then Sector 9, which is that north portion, north of the Kirkpatrick Turnpike, has the fewest. Any questions?
How do you deal with the municipalities that are embedded inside of our city limits and their sirens? What's the coordination there like?
The smaller municipalities that are embedded in us or even share a common border with us, they have their own discretion as to when they activate their sirens based on their policy. Having a smaller footprint, they can many times hold off because they can wait till it gets much closer. However, the way we coordinate it is that we make an entry into a system called National Weather Service Chat, which all the emergency managers will watch during these kinds of events. We make an entry in there that we're activating the sirens, and they can see that entry pop up in NWS Chat. And then based on that, they can make their decision to activate or not activate.
I see. So we let them know that we're putting our sirens off. Okay.
And we do that through NWS Chat.
And Frank worked real close with other communities in the area and through ACOG to make sure this policy is coordinated and consistent with the other communities in the area.
Yeah.
Ed?
How about meteorologists? I mean, do you go over all these changes with them so that they...
We're waiting to get some dates to talk to the National Weather Service in Norman. I've been working with Rick Smith, and we hope after the first of the year we'll go down and brief all the people down there at the National Weather Center. And I've been working with Public Information and Marketing we will schedule meetings after the first year with each of the TV stations to meet with their meteorologists and explain to them what we're doing.
Great.
Explain the policy to them.
Frank, if we went back to the May 31st, 2013 tornado, that would provide an interesting example just because of the change in direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you remember, did all 3 counties sound the alarm early, like say 5 or 6 p.m.? And did we continue to sound those alarms as the direction began to change? And if not, this system, I think, would allow us to do that, wouldn't
Under May 31st is one of those exceptions where the size of the polygons that they drew were so large because of the nature of the storms. You had a line of storms, you had multiple storms, so they just drew these large polygons that pretty much covered everything. But also what happened on the 31st is there were multiple warnings that were issued. What we found interesting is when we went back and looked at those warnings where we have, on those days where we had multiple warnings, typically they issued a new warning about every 15 to 20 minutes. There's only one example we found where they issued one warning and then a minute later issued another. But all the others were about 15 to 20 minute intervals, sometimes 30-minute interval. And so that was based on new identified tornado threats. And so in each of those cases, the sirens were activated based on those threats. Those days, like the 31st, are tough even with this policy and even with any other system you have in place, simply because there's just so much going on that they err on the side of caution and they draw really big polygons.
So we're not necessarily attempting to warn people of a specific path, just that they're in a general area.
We're trying to warn them that there is a tornado threat nearby and that they may actually be, in the path of the tornado. Where previously, because we were warning such a large area, there were people on, let's say, maybe the north side of the city that were not anywhere near any tornado threat.
Right. Well, I can give you an example. We were monitoring the weather that evening, and it appeared that it was just going on a traditional southwest to northeast route out by El Reno, Yukon, so we thought, Central Oklahoma City will be fine. But then later, it changed its direction, and if you weren't close to a TV or local radio, you weren't made aware of that change and possible dangerous situation. Would we be able to, in that example, begin to sound the alarms, in that new direction?
Yeah, every time the storm changes direction or there's a new threat or a new area threatened, we can change the sectors that are activated. So it gives us better flexibility than we have under the current policy and current practice. So we can better mix and match the sectors to the actual threat.
Any other questions for Frank? Frank, thanks. I think the citizens are going to really appreciate the changes. I know for years people have wondered why they get warned for a storm that they don't perceive as impending upon them. I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yes, we're pretty excited about it. We're looking forward to testing it out. this spring, but hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
I understand.
It's one of those things that we want to see if it works, but at the same time, we don't want that kind of event to occur.
You're not anxious for a lot of trial runs. I understand. Thanks, Frank. All right, how about a motion to approve then this kind of annex to the system? We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. All right, item 9L is a resolution that would establish a neighborhood district identification street marker system, and Robin Peace has signed up to speak. Do you want to you want to speak before we get the presentation on it or afterwards, Robin?
I just wanted to thank Eric Winger and Public Works for coming up with this great plan. This would really be a good tool for my neighborhood and all neighborhoods.
Yeah, and which neighborhood are you representing?
Military Park Residents Association.
Okay, and you all plan to put the signs up?
Yes, we do.
All right,
Yeah.
great.
So we're really excited for this opportunity.
Well, thanks for coming down and letting us know.
Thank you.
All right, Eric, you want to make your presentation?
I really just have just a few comments for you this morning. I think, as you might remember, Ms. Peace came to a council meeting in June and presented a sign topper for consideration, but we did not have a program in place. And it's something that maybe the city had thought about in the past, just not something that we had formalized. So what's on your agenda today is formalizing a process to do a neighborhood sign topper, a district marker, that would actually go on the top of an existing city street sign. So some of these you have found or you've seen in the Asian district up on Northwest 23rd and Classen. Those were not installed under this program. Those were a part of that project at that time. But what this project or this program will provide for is that residents in established neighborhoods can make application to the city. And included in the packet is the application process. Those applications will be made to Public Works Department and our Traffic Engineering Division, and we'll review those for approval. There's a $50 one-time application fee just to take care of some of the initial administrative expenses, and then it's just a $10 per sign location, and that will help purchase the hardware that's necessary to go on the top of the existing sign to attach the new sign. The neighborhoods will actually construct the signs. There are a few specs that are included just to make sure that the hardware is compatible with the sign. We'll obviously review it for content as well. But we have had some interest, obviously, from citizens like Ms. Peace, also the Neighborhood Alliance. I know Georgie Rasco sends her regrets for not being here today. She just wasn't able to make the meeting. So we've already seen some significant interest, and so we expect several applications if council approves today. So with that, the city will be donating some of the labor, so we'll be using some of our existing traffic crews that are already doing sign maintenance and things to actually make the installations as the signs come available and are approved. Any questions you might have?
So I guess one of the questions was whether these can go on top of stop signs or just street names.
We believe they can go on top of both, and we'll review them for compliance with that. But traditionally, we're expecting to see them on top of the street name signs. So anywhere we have an intersection and we've got an existing pole, that would be the best location. I think stop signs are applicable, yes.
So they can do both?
We believe so, yes. I mean, a lot of these are going to just be some of the hardware things, and we'll have to make sure that there's not a safety issue, but we'll look at each individual neighborhood and work with the applicants to make sure that we get the signs installed per request.
Okay.
I've already gotten a question about whether or not the city is capable of making the sign, and is that an option?
So as the part that we're presenting to you today, we are not in the business of fabricating the signs. Some of them are highly customized. The signs that the city fabricates are traditionally more just lettered signs on different backgrounds. The ones that you might recall that Ms. Peace had brought to the council did have a decorative element to it. They had kind of a curved top. There are several sign manufacturers that can make these signs, and as long as they're the right thickness and are not oversized, and we've got some restrictions on those, we're willing to accept those and place those.
Okay. Could we have a list of places that do make the signs that we can refer?
I'd be happy to provide those to you. And there's several private traffic supply warehouses in Oklahoma City that make signs for contractors and such, but I'll be happy to provide a list, yes.
Okay, thanks.
What's the process for getting it? Is it the Traffic Commission? Or where does it go through?
So this will actually be submitted directly to the Traffic Engineering Division. So my office at 420 West Main, the application has ability to mail that in. I would tell you that we'd like to make it an online application, but once approved, it doesn't require the Traffic Commission. Your authorization would be to allow me, as city engineer, to approve those and have that installation proceed.
But what process is there to determine what's appropriate, what's a neighborhood association, what's not?
Part of the application process looks for to see if they're an established neighborhood. There's going to be some staff review to make sure that that's a compliance item. We think we may get some applications that might require some clarification, and so we'll just need to work through those individually.
Okay.
So I guess, so the Traffic Commission wouldn't be involved at all?
Well, they have been involved. They're not directly involved with the approval process. So Commissioners Rob Littlefield and J.B. Shoeline have had a lot of interest in this, and this is a project they've discussed. Both have reviewed and have consented on the approval, but there's not an item that would be presented directly to the Commission. No.
We think it would just be easier for the neighborhoods if we handled it administratively, and we don't think that there's anything that would prohibit that. So they were involved in the policy, but not in the administration of actually the policy.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, we need a motion then to approve item 9L. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9M is a resolution that I believe is not going to require executive session, so a motion to approve would be in order. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Same story on 9N. Look for a motion to approve the resolution. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Same story on 9O, a resolution, no executive session. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. However, on 9P, the city manager is requesting an executive session to discuss collective bargaining with the police. All right, cast your votes. That item moves to executive session. All right, item 9Q is claims recommended for denial. We have a couple of people that have signed up to speak on these items. Ron Hagen, am I pronouncing it correctly? Yeah, come on up. Yeah, just come on up to the microphone. And is it Ronnie? Ronnie. We'll need your name and address for the record, please.
I'm sorry?
Just give us your name and address for our records.
Reniqua Hagen, and my address is 7143 South Santa Fe.
Okay, and you're here on claims recommended for denial, and I'm trying to see, this item D, I see your name.
And then,
what happened? What was the claim about?
The city tractor trailer that struck the vehicle that I was in, the passenger. It was is a recommend for denial, right?
Okay, and you were requesting
funds for
$20,000?
For pain and suffering and hospital bills, and I've already provided all of that.
Okay, well, let us get some information for our city staff. Tina,
And Mayor, this also concerns Claim C2, which is Ms. Hagen's minor child.
Correct. There's actually two.
All right, thank you.
There's also a connected claim from the owner of the vehicle in which she was a passenger.
And that is no I.
Okay. So 3 claims, and have all claims that pertain to this incident been denied, Tina?
They've all been recommended for denial, yes,
okay.
sir.
Can you give us some background on the city's aspect of it?
There evidently was a collision between a car owned by Donald Wallace in which Ms. Hagen was a passenger that was involved in a very minor collision with the trailer behind it's a mower behind a tractor that the parks operates. Our information is that the vehicles were stopped at a signal that they left together, that our driver says that the driver of this car drifted into him. They stopped, they spoke some, the city employee called a supervisor and the police were called out, but the other vehicle left the scene. So there's no collision report and there's no standard report other than what was done by the Parks Department, and they have a report that indicates what I just told you, and some photos of the damage to our vehicle, but we've never seen any of the damage to this vehicle, so we can't substantiate that. Miss Hagen went to get checked out and has just a brief check me out at the hospital bill and one bill for an x-ray of her elbow. There are no out-of-pocket expenses for her on any of that, and there's no follow-up care, and there's nothing else monetary that's connected with that injury. She's also seeking, she had 2 children in the car.
Yes.
She's also seeking $4,000 for the children, but there are no bills or anything to substantiate anything there. There was damage to the vehicle. There are 2 estimates. I can't substantiate, since we don't have photos, that all of the things in the estimates coincide with this accident. So we really have our statements at the scene. We have not a lot of documentation on the damages, and there's definitely a disagreement about what happened.
Yeah. And just one other clarifying point, Ms. Hagan is also claiming $3,120 for 8 weeks of lost wages.
Okay. Anything you want to add?
Actually, there was photos submitted of the vehicle, and as far as the hospital bills, I did have a injury, and I am going to rehab for the injury, but the lady that we were working with, Paulina, said that there was no need to bring that paperwork because she already written it up for denial, recommendation for denial. So
Yeah.
that's why I didn't bring that.
Do you know why the vehicle you were in left the scene before the police arrived?
Because the kids were screaming and hollering. We asked several times the driver, would he call the police? He said he had to call his boss first. So, I mean, we kept pressuring it, are you going to call the police? He said he was going to call his boss first. So we did have exchange information and all of that and just left because, I mean, there was nobody, he said he wasn't going to call the police.
Yeah.
He disputes that, and the police were called.
Okay. You know, you do have some legal rights in this situation, but I just don't know that this council is going to be able to address your concerns. And, of course, I'll confer with them in a moment, but you are allowed, you know, of course, legally to go across the street and file a claim in the county courthouse against the city, you know, based on the facts as you view them and pursue it that way. But we have to look after the city's taxpayer dollars, and we have to have certain things in place before we're able to pay claims. And I'm suspecting this just doesn't meet the threshold of a claim that we're able to pay. Does anyone on the council feel differently? Okay. Yeah, sure. Come on up.
We left the scene. We did leave the scene because the kids were screaming and hollering and yelling, and we didn't have a cell phone at a certain time. We were on our way to take the kids to daycare. My other daughter was driving. I was in the back with the kids, and the guy, we were at the light, and all I remember is being dragged by this car, by the tractor. He had something hanging over, and we were just pulled from her side. She was in the front seat, and I was in the back seat. And my other daughter was driving. The kids were screaming and hollering. We didn't have a cell phone, so that's why we left. We made a report once we got to where we were going. You know, we had to leave because it was like the way the street was, it was just like people couldn't get by, and we were just like in the middle of the road. And he had something hanging over in the street. You know, and the kids were screaming, like I said, and we asked him several times to call the police. He said no, he wasn't calling the police, that he was going to call his boss. So we took pictures, we brought pictures up here, and we have all that, and we brought everything up here we were supposed to. They didn't need to talk to me anymore because I wasn't hurt, and I was in the back with the kids trying to control them. But the police, we did talk to the police that same day. As a matter of fact, they were still at the scene when we talked to them over the telephone.
There's a 911 call to the police at which
it's not like we just left and didn't call the police or nothing like that. It wasn't like that at all.
It prevented any investigation of the accident by the police department.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the issues, and I can only imagine we all put ourselves in that car and with screaming kids and things like that, and having to go through the trauma of any automobile collision. I'm just suggesting that this council doesn't have the ability to pay this claim.
And it was my mother's vehicle. She works for the state. She's been working for the state for 20 years, and she wasn't even involved in, the car was clearly damaged, and he clearly hit us and drugged us, and, my daughter wouldn't have stopped. We would have, who knows what would have happened, because we were being drugged across the street. I don't even think he knew he had connected to us, so.
Okay. Well, I'm not disputing the facts. I'm just suggesting that we don't have enough evidence to be able to pay the claim. But you have other avenues of legalities that you can pursue if you'd like. Thanks for coming down.
Do you want to say something? Her claim is connected as well. So
I think this is Mrs. Wallace.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you kindly for allowing me to speak. My car was hit by the city truck tractor vehicle on September 2nd. My granddaughter and her 2 kids were injured. My car there was a lot of damage done to my car, and I did take pictures, and I have pictures on my phone. I had those pictures made, and they were submitted.
I found them. They're at the bottom of the file.
And also, I was told that your driver was arrested for DUI and/or drugs. And so my claim is for less than $6,000, and I've been waiting all this time since September 2nd to get my car fixed. And now you're saying that the claim is going to be denied?
There was no arrest of our driver. There was no suspicion at the scene of any intoxication of our driver, by the way.
I did speak to your driver, and he did sound really strange, and I asked him to call the police, and he said, no, he didn't want to call the police. He called his supervisor. He said his supervisor would know what to do. And he came out, and then I'm not really sure what happened because I was at work.
The police were called. They did respond.
Yeah, I'm not disputing anything you said. I'm just saying we don't have enough information to pay the claim.
Okay, so we'll just get an attorney. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is there a motion on claims for denial? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 10 is claims recommended for approval. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on any item listed under claims recommended for approval? Well, how about a motion then? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 11 is items from council, and I guess we'll start with the smoking ordinance. Pete, you have item 11A and B, and you have one person that has signed up to speak today. Okay. Lisa Sinar? It's like we have 2 people signed up to speak in favor.
Yes, I'm Lisa Sinar. I'm the Executive Director of Oklahoma City Beautiful. Our offices are at 3535 North Classen Boulevard. Putting my props down. Oklahoma City Beautiful is a nonprofit that has been picking up litter in Oklahoma City for 47 years, and the number one thing that is littered in our public places are cigarette butts. So this is why we are for the ordinance. I just have a few statistics. There are about 133,000 smokers in Oklahoma City, and they drop about 665,000 cigarettes each day on the ground. And we are spending thousands of dollars, the Parks Departments, our volunteers, Oklahoma City Beautiful, because we know that there's lots of health issues. Most people think that cigarette butts are biodegradable. They are not. They're made of plastic, and they leak all kinds of hazards into the ground. A cigarette contains poisons like nicotine, arsenic, battery acid, ammonia, and this all goes into our groundwaters. And so with the 133,000 smokers, it's equivalent to about 5 gallons worth of poisons that are put into our grounds every day. And that said, another thing that we are really concerned about is just the economic development. It is proven that when you have littered cities and cigarette butts underground, that it does affect the economic development of our city. And I just brought a little prop here. We had volunteers that picked these cigarettes up in one park in just a few minutes, 3 volunteers from the University of Central Oklahoma. And we just wanted to show you the effects of what can happen. And so we would like to encourage you to approve the ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Cassidy Falk. Good morning. We'll need your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Cassidy Falk. I'm with the American Lung Association. Our office is located at 730 West Wilshire Boulevard, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73116. The American Lung Association supports comprehensive smoke-free air laws to protect people from the dangers of secondhand smoke exposure in work sites and public places. Secondhand smoke is a serious health hazard, causing more than 41,000 deaths per year. It can cause or worsen a wide range of adverse health effects. Smoke-free laws and ordinances are the most effective way to eliminate secondhand smoke exposure in public places. Over the last several years, Oklahoma has made great strides in its efforts to create access to cessation services. These services, combined with tobacco-free and smoke-free property policies, help to improve worker health and productivity. A study released in 2010 by the American Lung Association and Penn State University shows that for every dollar a state spends on smoking cessation treatments, it receives a 26% return on investment. Tobacco-free and smoke-free properties also provide a clear, consistent message to children and young people that tobacco use is unhealthy and not a norm in the community. Children tend to copy what they observe and are influenced by the extent of smoking around them. Because of this strong role modeling effect, it's especially important to support adults who are trying to quit or cut back. The visibility and acceptability of smoking at a community level is associated with higher adult cessation and lower smoking rates. Policies that restrict smoking in various locations reduce the visibility and perceived acceptability of smoking in those locations. It also supports and reinforces prevention messages delivered in the home and classroom while helping to counteract tobacco advertising targeting young people. Over 50 Oklahoma communities have already adopted a tobacco-free ordinance that covers all indoor and outdoor city-owned and operated property. Let's continue this momentum and continue to protect the health of our fellow Oklahomans. Thank you for your time.
All right. Cassidy, thanks for your work.
Thank you.
All right. Pete?
Is there any other people signed up to speak? If not, I'd move the ordinance.
All right. We're voting on item 11A. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 11B?
Is there any?
No one has signed up.
I move the ordinance.
Is this the golf courses?
Yes, it's item B.
Pete, can I just respectfully comment? I'm not.
Sure.
I
understand.
It's just an honest. We just from Ms. Sinai and good points about denormalization, secondhand smoke, contamination of the water supply. I mean, excellent points by both, and I appreciate you coming. Each and every reason that they cited would apply to public golf courses. If there's really nothing that would apply to an Oklahoma City park, that you couldn't use those same arguments in an Oklahoma City golf course, which is basically another park. To me, there's an intellectual inconsistency, whichever path you choose. If it's denormalization, if you're trying to enact this in Oklahoma City parks because you want children not to see it, I'm not sure why you would exempt golf courses. If you're trying to protect from secondhand smoke, I think it's even worse with cigars. Does that make sense? I mean, if there's no support for that, fine. But I'm having trouble intellectually putting the two differentiating one on either one of those paths, denormalization or secondhand smoke. I understand the economic argument that they believe that some people might not come out and golf if they can't smoke cigars while they're golfing. But I'm not sure that that's intellectually consistent with the policy that we'd be enacting in all the rest of the Oklahoma City parks.
Well, the intellectual consistency from my standpoint is I wanted to get an ordinance that I could pass without a lot of hassle.
Right.
And I appreciate, I share some of your concerns, but I use this analogy all the time. I think good legislation is kind of like eating a foot-long hot dog. You have to take it a bite at a time, and this is just one more bite. We've been chewing on this dog a long time, and this is just one more bite. I actually, Ed, I'm not, if you want to propose that separately and have it put on, I'd probably vote for it. But my mission this time was to go as far as I could, and that's what I'm doing. And I understand how pragmatic that sounds to someone that's as highly motivated as you are, and I mean that as a compliment, but I just want to I know what the pushback would be, and I just want to get done what I could get done.
And I want to express how grateful I am that you brought this forward, but we passed it, right? So you've accomplished your goal. It's now...
Well, we've almost passed it.
Well, now we're just dealing with the exemptions. We've already passed your ordinance in Oklahoma City parks. You haven't? Wasn't that A?
No.
Oh, the first one's just vaping?
Correct.
Right.
I see.
It's minors and vape.
Yeah, we had to treat them separately. Cindy knows why. But the first one is the vaping portion, putting some penalties on selling that kind of stuff to minors and so forth. And the second one is smoking. The exemption that you're referring to is in the second one, though. Is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I thought that smoking was on as A, but maybe I'm confused.
It's B.
Okay, then the first one was about no teen vaping. We already have a prevention of access to tobacco for teens, which was about smoking, and this amendment, which is now allowed by the legislature for municipalities to pass, included vapor products. And then B is the no smoking ordinance, and the exemptions are part and parcel with the item on B.
I understand the analogy with the hot dog. Those of us in the recovery community, there's another saying, which is that half measures avail us nothing. And I'm not saying that it's nothing to do to stop short, but I think that if you're going to do it in Oklahoma City parks based on an argument of denormalization or secondhand smoke, that you protect everyone, I'd like to pass what. Maybe just exempt that out and vote on that separately. Do the ordinance and just do the golf courses separate. Vote on that separately.
You can't. You could make an amendment to Pete's proposed ordinance and put it into his ordinance. But if you pass the ordinance, you would have to then make that proposal a second ordinance that would be introduced to, say, at the next meeting and to amend what we've just done. You can't vote on.
Yeah, if we were to do that, we'd have to go through public hearings, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
I would take a little bit of exception to the idea that half measures don't work. And smoking is probably the best example I can think of. I mean, as we've moved through trying to restrict smoking, we've raised taxes. That helps some. We've banned smoking inside. That's helped some. We've managed to ban smoking in restaurants. That helps some. Manage them in parks now is going to help some more. I think the statistics on the number of people that smoke show it's working. There's a difference, I think, between what government can do and what maybe the private sector could do. It seems to me if government was going to do everything, I mean, we'd probably ban the use of alcohol, we'd ban the use of cigarettes, we'd ban the use of all kinds of things, but some of that, people, we'd ban helmets we'd make people wear helmets. I mean, people just kind of have a right in this country to kill themselves one way or another, and I'm not so sure we've got how far we can go in trying to stop that.
What is, it's really, is it symbolic? I mean, we're not really going to be writing tickets for smoking in parks, right? I mean, it's just a...
Well, if people do it, I hope we are.
I'm sure, the police will use discretion, but usually there's a warning, and if there's a complaint, they'll follow up on it.
I mean, put it out, followed by a ticket, probably. If they don't put it out, it's probably the way it'll work.
Okay.
I tell you that, I'm kind of obsessed with it almost, trying to reduce the smoking. I see what it's done to people. I've lost people I cared about through lung cancer because of smoking. I see what it does to other people, but on the other hand, I kind of pride myself in being as practical as possible, and I think practically this has every vote in the room, unless you vote against it because it doesn't go far enough.
I never would do that.
No, I'm saying it has every vote in the room, and that's what I was after. I tried to craft an ordinance that I could get through today, and if you want to ask that one be put on to remove the golf course expansion exemption and get a vote on that 2 weeks from now, we'll see how it works.
But you can't do that. You have to go through public hearings and start over.
Yes, you would have a new ordinance amending what you just passed today would be introduced at the next meeting, and then you have a public hearing and a final hearing.
Just pass what you have, and we can look at. But
well, it'll be quicker than it has been because we go back to once-a-week meetings next week, so they won't. It'll
exactly.
You could have it all done in January.
Fine.
All right, so we have the motion. Is there a second on item 9B? Second. All right, cast your votes. Passes 7-1.
The usage of golf courses during January is rather limited, so I don't think we've got a whole lot,
They have time to come down here and talk to us, though.
I'm sorry?
They might have time to come down here and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
All right, item 9C is for travel expenses to the National League of Cities.
Move the item.
Okay, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Other items from council. Mark, you have anything for us?
I don't today, thank you.
John? David?
No, thank you.
Pete? Larry? Ed?
I really, really like this Norman City Councilman, Stephen Holman. It's just gotten out of hand in Norman. I hope that nothing like that ever happens in Oklahoma City. I know that there's this focus on head shops, and I don't know what Oklahoma City's policy is. I don't know what the city council's policy is, but there seems inconsistency there as well. When you go to 7-Eleven, all those papers, people aren't buying those to roll cigarettes. It's for marijuana. So, to go and constantly go into head shops and go after people that are selling pipes and things like that, I hope that we don't find ourselves in that situation in Oklahoma City. But I really, really like him. I want to publicly express support for him. I think I'm even going to contribute to his legal fund, and I just really, really like him, and I think it's unfortunate.
All right. James? All right, city manager reports.
Chief Planter? Laura, who's leading our... Dr. Goodlow is here. Very good.
Always a pleasure to be here with you, and from time to time we come and talk about what our EMS system does and the great service that the fine men and women in the Oklahoma City Fire Department and IMSA and the affiliated fire departments that make up our system that serves metropolitan Oklahoma City and Tulsa, we talk about the clinical benefits of these fine, skilled professionals. Sometimes being able to put words into actions says a lot more. And so there are some folks that worked very kindly with the city manager's office to set up a demonstration this morning. And I think in the spirit of Christmas, Merry Christmas, by the way. If you don't celebrate Christmas, well, happy your holiday too, but Merry Christmas. And perhaps one of the best Christmas gifts that we as an EMS system and we as a community give our citizens is a second chance at life when over 2 times each and every day in metropolitan Oklahoma City, and the same is true in metropolitan Tulsa, we have individuals that wake up and they hadn't planned on dying that day, but they do. Tragically, most of the time, that death is permanent, but sometimes in a very, very inspiring manner, in a manner that we'll see demonstrated here in just a minute, we get the chance to give somebody a second birthday. And I can't think of a better Christmas present, whether that comes on December 25th or perhaps any of the other days of the year, that we as an EMS system, supported by you as our government leaders and the community at large, are able to do. This is particularly important for all of us because very poignantly, this is how the vast majority of you, this is how the vast majority of us are going to die. We are going to die on an unscheduled basis. We are most frequently going to die suddenly, and there is a very, very narrow window of time if we make the right actions for each other, if we quickly summon help, and we perform CPR. If you already know how to do it, that's wonderful, and I know you've been trained, so thank you for taking the time to do that. If you don't know CPR, it is as simple as trying to keep your wits about you in an obviously chaotic situation and just following the instructions of the emergency medical dispatcher. So this is a simulated sudden cardiac arrest. This is a very typical, appearing often until the time of sudden death, hardworking, respectable, good citizen of Oklahoma City that has suddenly died. And so are you guys ready to respond here in a few minutes? Okay. So what happens when somebody suddenly collapses? Over 60% of the time, it is in your house. People think about what happens if somebody collapses at the grocery store or any other retail establishment. That does happen, but more frequently than not, it happens in a personal residence. And so the key thing, the first key thing, is to call professional help, and that is always available 24/7 through 3 simple digits, 911 from any communication device here in Oklahoma City, right? And so if you are in a public location, what is very important for our citizens to know is find someone to call 911 while you start CPR. And the key to that is looking at somebody saying, you call 911, somebody has collapsed, they're not breathing, tell them I'm doing CPR. And then, very quickly, exposing your chest and starting chest compression. Do not worry about mouth-to-mouth breathing. It is just as simple as you have been trained, up or down on the chest. Just a couple minutes ago. I don't know what happened, you just suddenly collapsed. So what you're witnessing here is the first arriving crew from the Oklahoma City Fire Department, EMTs and paramedics. You got that there? Okay. And this device that is being used on the chest now is called the rescue pump. You will be happy to know, through your leadership and support, Oklahoma City is the first large metropolitan area in the entirety of the United States to use this device on the streets. We started this on October 1st. Okay, a shock is quickly delivered and then compressions are restarted. And so this is often, in our world of emergency medical services, referred to as a pit crew model of resuscitation. Most people can very quickly grasp the concept of how a very tightly controlled series of operations in the specter of motorsports helps for a lot of actions to occur in precise sequence in a very short period of time. That's exactly what you're witnessing here. So each of these professionals has a very clearly defined role. They know what their role is. They know what everyone else's role is. And now we have a couple of paramedics arriving from IMSA. So the key throughout all of this is that you will sense there is very specific continuity of chest compressions. At almost no period of time is there a pause in the chest compressions. And those compressions are very, very important because that is what gets circulation to the brain, that is what gets circulation to the heart. There's very careful monitoring of the heart rhythm throughout the resuscitation at different points in time. If it is appropriate to deliver an electrical shock to the heart, we do. And then there's also very careful control of ventilation. Nothing happens by accident that you're seeing. Everything is very, very carefully laid out. Shock delivered, and compressions are restarted. The reason that we pause when a shock is delivered is because from a safety standpoint of our EMTs and medics, we want to make sure that they're not actually getting any electricity in their body. So there's a very quick hands off the patient, shock, right back to it. During this period of time, often the station captain at the fire department will be interacting with the family or in a public setting, anyone that witnessed the collapse, to get as much medical information as possible and also to communicate what is happening. Particularly in a private residence, it is a very ethical and humane practice that we let patients' families know exactly what is happening and what we're doing trying to save their loved one. So this suction cup that you're seeing on the chest, what that does that we can't do with our hands is that it is not only actively compressing the chest, there is active decompression of the chest. And when we actively decompress the chest, it basically acts like a bellows or a vacuum in the chest that pulls more blood supply back into the chest to make the next compression more effective. And again, Oklahoma City and at the same time Tulsa are the first two large metropolitan areas in the entirety of the United States to use this. As of late December, there really are no other large urban areas. There are some suburban areas around the country that are using this. This is a completely repurposed device. We can use it on several patients. We disinfect the suction cup in between uses. But for a few $100s per device, we are achieving an entirely different form of CPR than you'll find almost anywhere else in the country. The paramedic at the head of the patient is now inserting a plastic tube into the trachea to allow for a little more efficient oxygenation and ventilation of the patient. And based on the specific cardiac rhythm, different medications specific to that rhythm will be given throughout the resuscitation as well. So hopefully what you sense in all of the work that's going on here, everything is very much synchronized. There really is not chaos. There actually is very little need for communication verbally between these EMS professionals because they all know their roles and what each other is doing.
Dr. Goodlow? Yes. Who invented that? I mean, where did it come out of?
So the use of the rescue pump, and there's also a device that is on the tip of the endotracheal tube called the rescue pod. Both of those work in sequence, again, to pull more circulation back so the subsequent compressions are much more effective. It was developed by a cardiac electrophysiologist. During his study at University of California, San Francisco, back in the late 80s, a gentleman came in who had had a sudden cardiac arrest in San Francisco. His family, for reasons we don't fully understand why, used a toilet plunger to deliver chest compressions, and that gentleman survived. He survived when he probably should not have otherwise, and that began about 20 years of scientific investigation by Dr. Keith Lurie, who is at the University of Minnesota. And so that's where this device came from. It is the only device approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration that carries a label that use of the device can improve the chances of neurologically intact survival from sudden cardiac arrest. That is the only medical device in the U.S. with that designation.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So you got to. So we'll see what this cardiac rhythm looks like on our next rhythm check. The key is a very back and forth motion with the use of compressions. At one point in time, it was not atypical to have somebody doing compressions for 5-10 minutes. We now switch off every minute so that no one fatigues and the quality of those chest compressions are maintained throughout the resuscitation. So a typical resuscitation in Oklahoma City will be approximately 20 minutes unless there is a return of circulation. Okay? So what we've simulated here is a return of pulse. They're now checking a blood pressure. And they will maintain assisted ventilations, assisted oxygenation through the endotracheal tube. We will keep the patient sedated if needed for pain control and any emotional duress that the patient may start to experience. Patient will be pretty quickly packaged onto a stretcher and taken to what is termed a level 1 cardiac arrest center in Oklahoma City. We have several of those among our hospitals. These are hospitals that have made the commitment to work very closely with our EMS system to have comprehensive cardiovascular services. We will start to cool the patient before the patient even arrives to the hospital. This slows the metabolism down. When we do that, we are working against the body's natural mechanism that produces inflammatory response that can lead to brain damage. Slowing that metabolism down is a very, very important part of post-cardiac arrest care. We were one of the first cities in the United States to bring that to bear on the streets in 2010. Now we also have the ability, what's being simulated here is running what's called a 12-lead electrocardiogram. This looks at the heart from 12 different angles, and we're able to pick up if perhaps the reason of collapse is due to a clogged coronary artery and acute myocardial infarction. If that is the case, We can transmit the 12-lead ECG to the receiving hospital before the patient even arrives. That mobilizes an interventional cardiologist and the cath lab team, shaving anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes off of time. Time is muscle. Taking 30 to 45 minutes off the time for somebody to be in a cath lab and get a balloon stent into the heart, open that artery up, that may not only be the difference between living and dying, it may well be the difference in how much impairment of cardiac function results. Excellent. Thank you very much. You guys can stop. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. So what you're seeing happens, again, at least 2, sometimes as many as 10 times in a day here in metropolitan Oklahoma City. And the takeaway from that care is the difference in life is not just that care, it is prompt recognition, activation of 911, bystander CPR, and then that gives these committed EMTs, paramedics, and their 4,200 other colleagues in our EMS system the best chance to bring that patient back to life. When you stack those things in favor of survival, here is what we recognize in metropolitan Oklahoma City. In the United States as a whole, when someone has a sudden cardiac arrest and it is witnessed and there is layperson CPR, and on paramedic arrival, we find that person in a shockable heart rhythm called ventricular fibrillation, the chance of survival in 2015 is approximately 13%. Now, that's not the most optimistic number, is it? Okay, a decade ago, it was 6.8%. So we have almost doubled it in the United States in a decade of very, very hard work with a lot of government leadership support, I would add, and there's a lot to feel good about where we are going into the next decade. That's nationwide. In metropolitan Oklahoma City, though the numbers wax and wane just a little bit from year to year, the reality is that your chance of survival from an event like this is not 6.8%. It's not 13%. It is at worst 30%, and at best 43%. And those numbers go up and down just a little bit year to year, understanding that the human condition is what it is. But the bottom line is Oklahoma City is a very, very good place. It is a very, very safe place in which to have a sudden cardiac arrest because of EMTs and paramedics that you see today. Thank you very much for your time this morning. God bless you and Merry Christmas.
Great presentation, Dr. Goodlow. Thank you.
Can I ask one question real quick?
Yeah, sure.
What are warning signs that that individual should have recognized earlier that day or a week before that you can tell people about on TV about?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that question, and I'm now going to be a little bit paranoid that you're looking at my email because I just received word this morning, one of the latest scientific studies that was shared by me with the American College of Emergency Physicians, literally just this morning, a couple hours ago, is that over 80% of individuals in the United States that have a sudden cardiac arrest do have warning signs in the days and weeks ahead. And those signs are chest pain, shortness of breath, unexplained back pain, unexplained arm pain, nausea, clamminess, just a sense of feeling very, very weak and fatigued. Any of those signs should prompt a visit to someone's primary care provider. If they don't have a primary care provider, we have excellent emergency departments in this community that are available 24/7. Certainly in the setting of sudden onset of chest pain, difficulty breathing, that is an extremely good reason to call 911 and get professional help, care right where you're having the problem, and very close monitoring and ongoing care on the way to a hospital-based emergency department. Sadly, in the 80% of folks that have those kind of symptoms, over half never act on those and use that as the warning that it is. So that is a particularly timely question, and I'm now going to change my email password. But thank you for that's really serious. That's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
That is the latest science that we have available just as of this morning.
Again, on where you place your palm on the chest, can you tell us again where that?
Happy to do so. So the easy place is just right on the breastbone, kind of the center of the breastbone. You can use the nipples as a good guideline. If you just put the palm of your hand just kind of right in the center between the nipple line there, you will be in a very safe and effective place to do chest compressions. Don't worry so much about how fast or how deep you're pushing. Just push as hard as you can and as fast as you can, and that truly will make a difference in the success of survival. We actually did a large-scale study here in Oklahoma City that we have shared on an international level now, looking at over 20 years of cardiac arrest in metropolitan Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And if somebody does bystander CPR, we didn't parse it out into just the right rate or just the right depth. We're talking any form of CPR, it nearly doubles the chance of survival. That's how important that CPR is until EMTs and paramedics can get there.
So with an adult, we shouldn't be concerned that we're pressing too hard, but what if it's a younger person, say a teenager or a child? Do we have to be concerned with the amount of pressure that we're placing?
So good question. Ultimately, you're not going to hurt that child by doing compressions.
Okay.
What is typically taught is rather than using two hands, to simply use one hand.
Okay.
And that is a little bit of a force reduction, but still, push fast, push hard, right there in the center of the breastbone. Of course, kind of use. What we use, even in our system, is not just an age criteria, but a size criteria. And many teenagers are near or at adult size, and so we really kind of key off the size of the victim more than the age. But it's a very good question.
Thank you.
Channel 20 have a public education on how to do CPR.
I don't know the answer to that. I'll check and get back to you.
If not, I will say we'll be very happy to put together a program and deliver that in a very timely manner for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Sales and use tax collections?
Yeah, I won't spend much time on it. We talked about it earlier this morning. For the month of December, our sales tax was 2.8% below last year, 3.4% under target. And again, we talked about these numbers earlier. Year to date, we're 1.2% below last year.
Okay. We have a couple of people that have signed up and are citizens to be heard. I'll ask them to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. John Muzingo? Muzingo. Uh-huh.
One of my biggest points in my grievance is that the city is fining me for parking in my grass driveway. I may have a 2-foot path for gravel. There's gravel all under the driveway. There definitely is. And the city really shouldn't be fining low-income people, because that's where this is going. The majority of these fines on people who are parking in their driveways that have grass on them, and they're being fined for it. I can't afford a paved driveway. Heck, I can't even afford a gravel driveway that meets city requirements. I'd have to spend almost $1,500, not to mention bulldozing out the old gravel and grass.
John, do you have a picture of your house or your driveway that we could look at?
No, I don't. It's over by downtown Air Park. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Here, a couple of years ago, we had some music company come in, and they was playing music that was over 75 decibels. It was shattering my windows. Cracks developed. And these are new windows. These aren't the old wooden windows. But back to my point on the driveway. I feel that we are being discriminated against because we can't afford these driveways. And when I say discriminated against, on Thursday, I can't park in the street. I'm not allowed to park on my grass. There's places up and down my street that have grass growing on their curb. There's 2 places on the street where the city has come in and supposedly laid low-grade asphalt over this. One of these places is right in front of my house. Across the street on my neighbor's drive has a very nice yard and a very nice driveway. But you have this chunk of asphalt that's extending over the curb. You know, I realize that the yard thing, because I don't like people parking in the yard. It ruins their yard. But my driveway is not and has never been a yard. It's discrimination. We've been living there, the house has been there over 50 years, and you're discriminating against people who have older homes.
John, thank you.
And one more thing. Mr. White, I guess it was, I liked your deal about bans. You know, too many bans. This is banning people that are parking on their driveway. I'm not going to say yard, because when I saw the ticket, I still don't think it's my yard. It's not a paved yard, it's a driveway. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I really hope you readdress it, because it's discrimination not only against me, but at least 16 other homes on my street that have driveways that do not fit the Oklahoma City's ordinance. 10 driveways on our street.
All right. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Mayor,
I wish you would do something.
Mayor, I weigh in on, we just listen to people and go on, but I was on the council in the 50s when we introduced, the 80s, excuse me, when we first introduced the driveway ordinance. When we first introduced the ordinance to ban parking, to change it to yard parking, and what he says is one of the things that came up at that time is there were a number of people that live in Oklahoma City that the houses don't have garages, but there are spaces. They don't, so because they don't have garages, they don't have regular concrete or even gravel driveways. And I get a lot of complaints. I have a lot of areas like the one that's in Ward 6 where he's talking about, but I have a lot of areas in my ward that people don't have garages, and if they do, there never was a paved driveway there. The building permit was issued without a paved driveway, and I would like maybe just take a look at that again, just the whole idea of doing it.
I wrote down his address and phone number, and I'll make sure we follow up. You gave it on the sheet, so I'll make sure that we follow up with it.
I think I appreciate the fact that he says he doesn't like parking in the yard because that's what the real controversy was. But once in our effort to try to ban yard parking, I think we may have tightened down the parking in homes that don't have and never have had driveways to the point that we put people like him in a bad situation.
We're talking about 2,000, maybe as many as 50 to 100.
Yeah, I know. I understand. We're going to look into it. All right.
I wish you do it quickly because you have people out there giving us tickets and we don't deserve it.
We'll look into it quickly. There's the ticket giver right there. You can get him out of the hall and just chew on him.
Joe Sarge Nelson, do you want to say something?
Just
David,
quickly,
Joe walks up?
could we at least, if nothing else, grandfather those homes that were built, issued building permits prior to the enactment of this ordinance?
We typically do, but there's obviously something going on here that we have.
I think more information on his
Thank you.
specific case.
I'm Joe Sarge Nelson. I've been here before, and I was startled. I got to see this incident and got to see the captain that was in my living room. Got to see what they did to me. It was very inspiring. At least after dying 7 times in one day, Captain Spiegel, I got to meet him for the first time out here in Illinois. But anyway, that's not the reason I'm here. An envelope was delivered to you people. Please shred it. It was inadvertently sent to you. I wrote it in a matter of anger a long time ago. And how the date got on it, I don't know. I found one of them and I said, well, 2016 is not going to start out that way. Y'all got your plate full, and it'll probably stay full. I'll fight the fights if I'm alive that need to be fought. And it won't be that many. I've got 2 or 3 on my plate. But anyway, out of respect for this council, I did speak to 2 of you, and I'll leave their names out of that. I've spoke often to all of you. I look at your names up there. Oklahoma City's a hard job. As a general contractor at one time, and in the military, you catch hell from every corner. You select a certain amount of people. Every one of you up there, 8 people, have a certain group you have to deliver to. I happen to live in an area. There's a lot of everything going on over there, and Mr. McAtee will verify that. He's a busy man. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I mean that sincerely. I hope to see you all here 2016. I'll be, any regards to any bad remarks that I make, I don't want to leave my ear empty. I'll apologize to you face to face and look you right in the eye. I'm man enough to do that. Mr. Mayor, Ms. Kersey, Mr. Greenwell, Mr. Stonecipher, Pete White, Mr. McAtee, Mr. Shadib, and Grenier. I do have 3 things on my plate for next year, but only 3. And it's going to take all 3. It's going to take a year for me to get all 3 of them done because they're going to be hell-bent for later. I did speak to Ken Jordan out there, and I wished him well. I hope I don't keep you too busy with typewriters and aides and whatever have you. Please don't put me in federal court. I hate going up in front of them judges. But, ma'am, you too. Y'all have a nice Christmas, and I won't talk anymore. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Joe. We have executive session. We'll be back. All right. We have returned from executive session. Is there a motion on, let me get the number, item 3B, which would be on the city manager's position? And the motion is a 1% increase in salary? All right. All right. And we're voting on item 3B. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 3C is for the municipal counselor on the 1% increase. Okay, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. And item 3D is on the city auditor. All right, cast your votes, and it passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.